Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and we are here with the absolute hench review that we are about to go into. This is, of course, Tenet. We've given it about over a week now. I think it's been released in the US for a couple of days now. Not everywhere in the US. We do want to stress that. I think that I know New York especially, and I think is it LA as well, hasn't quite got this movie yet. They're still waiting on that. But I think the majority of people have seen the film now. Maybe you've seen it once. Hopefully you've seen it a few times. I think that we've definitely seen it at least twice, all of us on the channel now. And we are going into our spoiler review. So we do want to stress that if you still haven't seen this film, you have no business on this video. I'm sorry, go watch our spoiler-free review. That's up on the channel. That's a very, very short review, just sort of initial opinions as soon as we came out of that screening. But we're going to go into everything today. This is going to be the film, the theories. We're probably going to delve into some other stuff too. So it is all going to be a part of this one. So before we get into the nitty gritty of it, I guess we should pass over for socials at the moment. So we have been doing Christopher Nolan month this month. We do have one more video following this. We decided to extend it a little bit. So we do have an epilogue coming up this Saturday where we'll be ranking all of Christopher Nolan's films, including Tenet. So all of his 11 films, his 11 features that he's done, we will be ranking in our own personal worst to best as a nice way to round off the month. And then into uncharted territory, we'll be back to usual business as normal, film reviews, reactions, and all that good stuff. But yeah.
Absolutely. And as usual, the best way to find us on these things is on social media, because we don't know our schedule yet. We know there's a lot of things coming out tomorrow and next week, the week after.
Oh, yeah.
Cinemas are starting to open. So when we know what we're doing, we haven't planned September yet. The best way to find out is, of course, following us. It's Facebook, Cinema Savvy, Twitter at Cinema_Savvy, and the same on Instagram. We also have a link to the TeePublic in the description below. We do have a Sing Copy t-shirt, which... wow, Nolan month's finishing, isn't it? So a couple more days to pick that one up. And obviously, as Chris mentioned, we've got the ranking video coming this Saturday, the 5th of September. But we're not here for that. We are here for the spoilers for Tenet. Now, if you haven't watched our video from last Wednesday, when obviously it was released in England, we all saw it on the opening day. We had a very different review to normal because none of us understood it. None of us knew what to do. It was a very different review. So for those that didn't join us, we're going to leave it with you we're going to give our quick recap thoughts on that. So my one was, I had a very long day. I was very tired. Watched it at the BFI, which was a perfect experience. But I didn't have a clue what was going on. And I just couldn't bring myself to say I liked or disliked it, because if I didn't understand the film, I couldn't say it's a fair opinion, say what I liked and disliked. So I couldn't piece anything together to make a fair statement. The main thing I was talking about was the innovation within the film, which is still very strong. So that was my basic instinct. I don't know if you want to say yours.
Yeah, I think me and you were pretty much on the same page. Appreciated the direction, the complexity of the ideas. The ideas may have been too complex for a first viewing. I think a lot of people have been saying that. Sorry, I've seen that on a lot of reviews recently. But it was one that I felt like I couldn't pass fair judgment on because I didn't understand the film. Only when I understand the film can I give it a fair critique. It was just sort of broad strokes in that the action was filmed fantastically, the ideas behind it, the in-camera action, practical effects, which Nolan always does brilliantly. My downsides were the audio mixing on my initial viewing, and I think that's chief among them. Probably the biggest negative that I've seen across most people are saying that they struggle to hear the dialogue. I think that is quite a persistent issue. And sort of the lack of characterization in some people, it lacked a certain humanity. I think it was very much a concept film, an ideas film, and in terms of like actual interpersonal character relations and characterizations in general, specifically for the main character, the protagonist, John David Washington, I felt was lacking a bit, and I would have liked to have seen a bit more personality brought to those people. But other than that, whether I liked it or disliked it, I had no idea. It was one of the strangest first viewing experience. I can't think of another film that I've had that with, where I've come out of it that clueless. It almost felt like I hadn't seen the film. I was in exactly the same state as I was before the film even started.
My initial stance on the film, from the first time watching it on the spoiler-free review, was I was very much in the middle. I did want to make a stand on it. I didn't want to be kind of, oh, don't fully understand it, don't fully comprehend it, so I can't judge it. I did want to at least give some kind of basis off so that when we came to this review and we watched it for a second time, I could see where I'd gone and see whether the film had gone up in my mind or down in my mind from the starting point. But I put this film very much in the middle. It's a very, very ambitious film. It is incredibly ambitious, probably one of the most ambitious films I've ever seen or maybe ever will see. Some of the ideas that he came up with for this film are just fantastic to see on film, and it was great watching it in IMAX. As long with what Chris said with the audio on first viewing, it was almost horrible. You couldn't hear most of the dialogue, which made it very hard to pick up on a lot of the plot points, which I think was part of the confusion. I mean, the film itself is a confusing film and a very kind of brain warped film in the first place, but it didn't help that we weren't able to hear it properly in the first viewing. So I made sure that my second viewing wouldn't be in IMAX, and made sure just to check whether it would be different from watching it in IMAX and watching it not on IMAX. My biggest downside, though, on first watching was that the idea that the film itself could alienate a lot of audiences. The fact that the film was so confusing, and a lot of people will be maybe watching this film possibly only once. If they didn't understand it the first time, it's going to be a 50-50 split. 50% of the people will be intrigued to go and watch it again. 50% of the audience will just dismiss it and say, well, actually, I didn't like it because I didn't understand it. It's working with a lot of high concepts, and it lost all three of us in the first viewing. Let's put it that way. We love Christopher Nolan even. So we were always going to go and watch it multiple times, but not everyone is as into film and wanted to watch the first film properly coming back to cinemas, and ended up being confused and not really understanding what just happened, and maybe feeling like they waste their money on a film that they won't understand.
I mean, that's a good point, because it obviously is the first big film back at cinemas, which is the big address thing. However, he didn't make this film during a pandemic. He made it before. So I still maintain that aspect that if you're going into a Nolan film, and I get it will confuse people because it has. I've got siblings that one of them didn't like it because they didn't understand it. The other one said that she didn't understand it, but she's got no issue with it because she likes the director. And that's going to be a common occurrence. However, this is the same guy that did Inception, and this is the same stories from 10 years ago. I think this is far more complex than Inception.
Oh, yeah.
The same story took place. I even said to you guys, if you saw an Inception review, you know, I was meant to watch it at the cinema, and then because one of my sisters said everyone told her it was confusing, our family didn't go. And obviously it took me 10 years to be able to go to the cinema to watch it. So it's one of them where it's going to be a similar conversation to them. And as far as director goes, it is those ideas that one man comes up with it, and then we all kind of have to not put up with it, but we have to take it in. But I do think that is a good point about alienating people, because it outright will. However, I think that they're stupid to go to a cinema if they want to watch an easy film and they pick the one that says directed by Christopher Nolan, because that's just at this point.
They've probably seen the adverts and gone, "Oh, look, a film's coming back into cinemas. Oh, we should go and watch it," and stuff like that.
Absolutely, but they could have watched New Mutants as well.
No one's going to be watching New Mutants. Let's be honest here. I mean,
I'm probably going to go and see it. I'm probably going to have to see it, aren't I?
It's more the concept that this is, to me, Nolan and Tarantino are the only two directors in the world that's name is the franchise. It's not the films, it's their names. So there's a Spielberg film coming out. It's not got the pull it wants to. Say Scorsese film coming out. No one watched Silence. Not everyone's seen Irishman. There's not many directors that have guaranteed audiences off the name. And I think when obviously Tarantino's built his name off everything, his writing, his violence, and all that stuff, you know what you're going to watch a Tarantino film for. You're not going to take a 12-year-old and you're not going to say, "Oh, I'm hoping I don't get offended watching this film," because they're the keys going in. That's stuff that people know. And I think it's the same for Nolan film, that if you're going to get this complex idea, I think it's naive just to be like, I'm just going to the cinema because they're open. People will do that. Like I said, one of my sisters did that, paid the price for that. However, they had a month to watch all the old films that were shown on loop. But I think that's a good segue to move this next bit, because as you've all said, we've all seen this multiple times now. I'm going to jump in first. So I saw it. Second viewing was the day after we all saw it. I went to IMAX with my dad and came home from that showing. I was like, it's going to be tough tomorrow. Like, he's like, "You sure?" I was like, if I didn't get it, I don't think you will. And that's just me as a film person saying that politely. Still booked it, was still excited. So second viewing was an interesting experience, because obviously I didn't have any opinion on the first, and I was actually terrified that the second one, if I don't understand it, I'd be gone. That was my main fear. Sound mixing, we mentioned, it didn't affect me as much, but there were certain scenes where it did. So I was intrigued to see it again at another cinema. Now I went to IMAX again, but I went to a slightly smaller one, but a newer one, and that was in Birmingham. And the audio was, bar 1.5 scenes, I'd say, was pretty much perfect. So I think it's a cinema thing. I think there's major issues. There's Film Stories podcast did a great poll last week asking who's had issues watching it with audio. 30% said no, 70% said yes. So it is a cinematic thing. And that was a couple of hundred people that commented. Obviously, that was the UK releases as well. So that is worth bringing up. So I was kind of worried, like, okay, is my dad going to hear it okay? Is he going to get it? Like, he's good with his films, but I just didn't know. And it was a weird experience because I've never gone into a cinema disliking a Nolan film. And that's where my quiche was like, do I dislike a Christopher Nolan film? And my brain was just whirring. And I came out of that screening and I was like, okay, I didn't like the film. And that was me being bluntly honest. I bloody adored the film. I fucking love the film. I've now seen it 4 times, every single one at the same IMAX, and there will be a couple more. This is on track to get my Force Awakens record for cinema trips. But that's all I'm going to say right now. I'm going to pass over to you guys for your ones, because followed up. Also, sorry, the main thing, I forgot to say, everything clicked on the second viewing. It was a weird experience because sometimes a film just clicks like that in your head and you get it. But this was like a sort of scene by scene, that one scene worked and then the next scene worked and the next scene worked, and the brain wasn't even going into overdrive. It was just naturally coming together in my head, and that's what's blowing me away. As much as the first viewing that confused me, to go to a second screening of the most complex thing I've ever seen and have almost every answer, pretty much key plot point answered in every passing by scene, that's blown me away more so than the film itself. Don't know why, but that's how I felt with that.
I was similar with mine as well. So the only IMAX I've seen it on currently is still the one that we did first viewing, BFI IMAX. Since then, I've just been to 2 of my local cinemas. I think it's like described as iSense. It's a bigger screen than usual and meant to be better audio and things like that, but it's by no means an IMAX experience in terms of the picture. And gradually the sounds got better in each viewing. The first time I saw it on IMAX, honestly, I understood barely any of it. And I agree completely with what Tate said at the beginning, where it was already a complex film, and that didn't help as well that you couldn't understand the dialogue. When you were trying to understand it and trying to hear what people are saying, you couldn't. Second viewing was the loudest. My ears were ringing afterwards. I felt like I had shell shock. The bass was all the way up, but I could hear more of the dialogue this time, not all of it. And even now, there are still some key scenes after 3 viewings that I still really struggle to hear. I think that's just how they're made. One in particular is where a lot of exposition is given between Kenneth Branagh, Kat's character, and John David Washington, and they're on some kind of sailboat, and they're talking over walkie-talkies. You've got the roaring of the waves, you've got the sound of the boat, and then that's still really tough to hear. But the third screening I went to, much more of an expansive cinema, same size screen, but the actual auditorium itself was much wider. So maybe it had better acoustics. And as soon as scene 1 started with the first line, the line that has always been muddied by sound effects and music, I heard perfectly. It was like it was brought to the top of the mix. And it was a great experience. Now, picture-wise, I wish I could have taken the picture from first viewing and the sound I had from third viewing if I could have my ultimate combination. But no, I completely agree. On second viewing, everything clicked. Maybe not I'd say like a good 85-90% of stuff clicked. It was mostly just like maybe 1 or 2 scenes that I needed further like analytical surgery to really get to the bottom of it. But I think, George, I don't know if it was you mentioned it in the spoiler review. You mentioned you compared it to a jigsaw puzzle, like a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. And you said that the first viewing, the jigsaw puzzle is a plain white image, and we just did the border because they're the easiest pieces to do. I'd say running with that, second viewing, filled in the picture, maybe a couple of pieces missing out the box, but you get the majority of it. And then third time, the puzzle was glued, it was done. And that's kind of where I'm at the moment. It's nice to be able to understand it. I get what Tate says, that some people are probably going to be a one and done because that's how they are with movies. If they don't get it, they can be quite dismissive. I like a challenge. I like a challenging movie, and I don't back down easily without a fight. And by God, by Jove, I think I've got it. So and I love this movie too. I still acknowledge its shortcomings in terms of its characterization. So pretty much in terms of the audio mixing and the characters, I still stand by, and I still have that. but I like high concept films. I like challenging films. I like, and this isn't anything new. People are acting like this is new from Nolan, that he's been light on character. He's mostly been light on character for the majority of his filmography. Most of his films are these concept films. Yes, you could argue that stuff like Memento maybe did a better job with the lead character. Even with Cobb, he had some investment in the story. He was working towards something amidst the high concept film that was Inception. Sorry. But even now, I still watch this film and I think, how did one person come up with all of this? And I grasp that more. And in a world of, remakes, superhero films, sequels, live action remakes, everything like that, it's refreshing to have an original film with original concept that's complex, loads of practical effects in there. I'd actually say, in terms of action, this is probably some of Christopher Nolan's best action in any of his films. This might be the best action he's ever done, in my opinion, even more so perhaps than Dunkirk, in terms of its staging and the camera and the photography and everything. So no, it's nice to finally have a stand on this movie. And I've never really had that before. But it's like a complete, I won't say a 180 because I didn't hate it. I was just sort of flatline. I didn't have an opinion, but it's nice to finally get one from the second and third viewing. And I'll probably get another 2 or 3 viewings out of this maybe before it's all said and done in cinemas.
I'm probably not going to go back and watch this in cinema again, maybe towards the end of its run, who knows. But for me, I saw it on a bigger screen the second time round, even though it wasn't IMAX. It was whatever Showcase calls their IMAX, like their Cinema Deluxe type thing, with their kind of, I don't know how it's different or anything like that, but the screen was definitely bigger. The auditorium was definitely bigger than my first viewing. I still had issues with the sound. There was still a lot of issues with the sound. And it was in the same scenes as previously. So, scene as you said, like they did a poll online, and it's most cinemas and stuff like that, and it's different between cinemas. You never know. Like it could be just that the case, or maybe I need to search out a cinema that has like the correct sound for the film. I doubt that it's going to be fixed cinema side anytime soon. So I feel like that one may be lost to the film itself, but. I mean, we'll see what happens when this film comes out onto kind of digital or Blu-ray release, and see whether there is still those sound problems, or whether they're able to do something when they're putting it for distribution. On the second viewing, I want to say I enjoyed it more, but I found more flaws with the film. I enjoyed the spectacle more. I was able to kind of sit back having kind of an idea of what the plot was actually about from the start, and picked up on more things during each and every scene. I'm sure someone's going to comb through this film with a fine comb and just go through all the Easter eggs and stuff like that. But something
do it in this review today.
something very specifically that I missed the first time around, and I don't think anyone would have been looking for it. When they just before the car chase, before they do the inversion with the kind of interrogation with Elizabeth Debicki and Kenneth Branagh's character in the other room where he shoots her with the inverse bullet. Going towards that buildings, when they're going in, one door is red and one door is green, I believe.
Blue.
Which is the same as what was done in the earlier scene at the airport, which I hadn't picked up on the first time around. I don't think anyone would have.
And then they wear the armbands at the end as well, red and blue. That's like the colour code.
Red and blues, yeah. From the opening scenes to the closing, red and blue is the color palette. It's not color palette. It's not as Zack Snyder black filter. They try, and to me that's like a really like not easy, but it's like here's an obvious nod where red and blue is going to put a key thing in this, and I think you pick it up it's in the airport, it's in the interrogation. Obviously the obvious ones, the watches and the tags at the end, but I think that was a smart way.
I picked up on those the second time round, and I wasn't even looking for those things the first time round. But something that you guys mentioned on the first review, and something that I kind of picked up on and kind of couldn't understand why, and couldn't put it into words as to what was wrong with it. But I just do not like John David Washington's character. He's a fine actor, and I mean, he's great in BlacKkKlansman, and safe to say, he's good in this film as well with the acting that he's been given. I just didn't really like the character itself. And he is meant to be the protagonist, the person who you're meant to be behind throughout the entire film. But a lot of the delivery of his lines, I know this is just how he's been told to act in these scenes and stuff like that, but I just couldn't get behind him in this film. And it's very difficult to say that you fully like a film where you don't like the main character and you can't really follow him through his journey. I mean, I gravitated way more towards Neil, and I think George did as well, gravitating more towards Neil and stuff like that. But
I think, I mean, I don't want to get onto characters just yet because we talk about characters later. So if I just do a quick broad stroke.
Sorry, I did a massive side tangent, but that was
no, that's fine. To me, I didn't have a problem with his acting. In fact, I thought his acting kind of saved the shred of a character he had. My problem with the character is on paper. He's not really he's just a guy sort of doing a job, and it's nothing really beyond that. He doesn't have any kind of emotional stake in there. There is the whole thing where he's trying to protect Elizabeth Debicki's character of Kat. It never really sort of blossoms into any kind of romance or a romantic interest. It's just sort of someone that he's trying to save at multiple different parts of the film. But he never really goes beyond that. When he gets recruited by Tenet at the beginning, a company that, faked this whole operation in order to get him on board, tortured him, yanked his teeth and everything like that. He kind of readily accepts them at the beginning and doesn't really say, well, what's in it for me? Why should I join you when you've done all these horrible things to me? He just kind of goes along with it. What saves the character for me, and I do think those are problems, and I would have liked to have seen a more sort of well-rounded character with some kind of personal stake in the film, was John David Washington's acting. I think he plays it with so much charisma and so much charm that the limited amount of character that he has on paper and from the script, he is able to elevate that from his natural charm and personality, and that's what kind of shone through with me. To a similar extent, Robert Pattinson's character as well, but I do think that this helped with second viewing. When you get to the ending and you kind of realize that the majority of the film, he is almost like a guardian angel kind of character, and that friendship that, granted, happens off screen. That's worth noting as well, is that we'll probably be talking more about this later, is that the main two characters, they have some great back and forth throughout the film, and you can see a friendship for us establishing there, but you don't really see that their friendship in their prime, because it is that moment in time that we don't get to see. As they say at the very end of the film, this is the spoiler review after all, Robert Pattinson is coming to the end of that friendship, and it's just beginning for John David Washington. So we don't get to see those years, those moments where they built there. But I think that works for the characters, and I think especially in that ending delivery, the charisma of both of the actors do get that across on screen.
It gets better throughout the film, but I just see him as kind of like, it's very different when you're comparing it to the other Nolan films. Because when you're looking at the other Nolan films, especially with Inception, the one film that we can kind of compare this to the most, you've got Cobb kind of explaining the world, or even Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character explaining the world to Ariadne and having her journey, and us witnessing her learning all the rules and stuff like that. I feel like with this journey, it's very different. Like he isn't being taught kind of the rules and stuff like that. He's seeing the rules. There's only one scene where he's kind of told about the whole kind of
there's probably two. There's the bit with Fleur Delacroix at the beginning, and then there's a bit where he says, like, brief him just as he's about to go into the inverted worlds. But there's really only two, I would say. And they are kind of very quick, aren't they? They're fired through very quick. He's got to get out and on his mission.
I don't want to, as an audience member, I don't want to be kind of handheld or anything like that. I just feel like there could have been more done to not explain the concept, but ease us into the concept instead of like throwing us in the deep end and stuff like that.
So with him, I know we're kind of moving into characters when we're trying not to, but he's a very typical two-dimensional protagonist. And it's the same name as well, protagonist. It reminds me of your Harry Potters, your Luke Skywalkers is in first films, not as what they become. And it's like, okay, we're bringing you in this. And the Inception comparison is interesting because I mentioned the spoiler-free review that you've got these supporting characters in Inception. Ariadne, you follow her, you're on her journey, you're with her. And she's got Cobb who teaches her things. It's the merging of the two. You're now on this journey, bringing in, like John David Washington, like Ariadne, but then he's slap-bang protagonist like what Cobb is. And I think because you're learning with him, I don't think he gets that emotional, personal stake which you need to develop. and it's that very typical hero thing. Whereas when you get the characters like Neil, Sator, and Katz, they're far more interesting characters. Some of them more ambiguous than others. And I think they're characters where, because they're not the lead, you can have that extra thing with them. Because with John David Washington, I see him more than the character. I know he doesn't even have a name, but
yeah,
I see that.
Here's the question, though. Would his character have benefited by actually having a name?
No. It doesn't need one. It'd just be a word added in for the sake of a word, right?
Wouldn't that characterize him more?
I think the fact that he's called protagonist doesn't help. I think it kind of just highlights the issue a little bit more. But I think, no, if you did give him a name, you'd still want that personal connection to something. I kind of see him as he's almost, actually the first half of this movie to a point plays out more or less fairly streamlined. It's almost like a James Bond film. It's a very sort of country hopping spy espionage thriller. We've got to achieve this, but before we do that, we've got to meet with this person, we've got to rendezvous with this, we've got to do, and it's all these little beats that plays out, and there's very little sci-fi elements in it, and we see the hints of it and everything like that, but it's mostly just plays out fairly conventionally, and then it's probably not until the hand-to-hand fight in Oslo where we start to see those elements of the sci-fi come in, and then by that midpoint, especially from the inverted interrogation, and then the entire last part of the film, that's where you really get into your sci-fi stuff. So maybe you could compare, because James Bond as a character doesn't really have much personal stakes in anything. Maybe more so now in the Daniel Craig ones, they all kind of follow on from each other now. It's not sort of these episodic, here's Bond doing something this time in a film. These newer ones are kind of giving him more personality and more stake in there. So maybe I'd compare this to some of the old school Bond films where it's just, here's a man on a mission, this is the villain, this is what he's got to do, and he's just going to go and achieve it.
Is, James Bond has a personality.
Not in many of them.
I'd say in a lot of them, he has
He's got charisma and charm, definitely. Yeah. He's got, it's the witty quips, the one-liners and everything.
I didn't want to say Bond because that's the really obvious go-to, and it's an espionage film that's inspired by the guy that everyone said for 10 years, is he going to direct Bond or not? And, Bond is very two-dimensional, and I think that's where the comparisons come in, is that, when you go to Bond film, you're not going for James Bond, you're going for the gadgets, for the plan, for the over-the-top villain. You go in to a Bond film to kind of politely see everything except James Bond's. You want the car chase, you want the Aston Martin, you want the the plans and everything. And I think that's where the Bond things come in, is that I saw this, I think it's the Empire review, which is getting put everywhere. It's, quote, Bond on acid. And it feels very much, now we can delve into more, this feels like, okay, here's my spy film that hasn't got the hangover of being Bond, and I'm taking out all the crap that I don't want in a Bond film. The Bond girl, he says it from the get-go, I'm not going to seduce her. And that there's no love interest in that. There's a better dynamic of him looking after her, but you align more for the characters, because I think it stays in the shadow of Bond, but you get the Bond comparisons. But really, I think this is a lot further away than Bond than even I thought a month ago, a week ago. It's delved further and further in. Even off some of his earlier, but Inception's the biggest comparison. But as the more I've thought about this, the more I'm seeing a Memento comparison. This is like Memento on steroids for like many different reasons. I think in terms of concept, idea, innovation, just filming methods, it actually feels like one of the most ambitious things I think not just this director's done, but a lot of mainstream films would do. And the fact it's a $200 million budget film, I think obviously we want to be in it for the characters, and we're granted not fully there with the protagonist. But ultimately, I don't think we were there for that character. We were there to watch the Nolan film, and we kind of got everything in that Bond comparison. You go to the Bond film for this, you go to a Nolan film for that. And that is what we watched, this insane over the top. And, as a character point, I think if you look at Inception, Cobb's probably one of the best, if not the best rated original character from a Nolan film. It's unfair to put Batman in because of pre-existing material, I guess.
Yeah.
I'd say probably this is a different topic, but like Leonard probably for me from Memento, because there is that moral grey area there. But I do definitely think because he just has that personal stake. I think as a conventional film, we respond to characters more that have some humanity, that we understand their goals, what they're trying to achieve. And in this, it doesn't really go beyond saving the world, essentially. He's like a special agent trying to save the world ultimately. So again, there's sort of like another Bond comparison, I guess, there. But in terms of like You mentioned this being one of Christopher Nolan's most sort of ambitious films. I was just reading a bit about the pre-production of this thing. Apparently, he's been conceiving ideas behind this. It dates back to about 20 years ago. He was throwing ideas around for this thing. And apparently he was quoted saying, "I've been working on this iteration of the script for about 6 or 7 years." So again, it's going back to those things that we talked about in Christopher Nolan month, where we expect, his previous films done, Dunkirk, what's he going to do next? But this idea has been going way back, and maybe even Christopher Nolan's mortal and has to try and get his head around the whole idea, and maybe it's taken him this long to do it. I don't know. But he's also partnered up with the guy from Interstellar, hasn't he? Sorry, the physicist Kip Thorne. That's it. Yeah, and I know. And there are moments in this film where, like Interstellar, they do kind of have those science babbles and theories and everything, which even Robert Pattinson's character in the film says, does your brain hurt yet, or does your head hurt yet? Just get some sleep, forget about it. And it's kind of like Fleur's line at the beginning as well, where if you can't quite get your head around the concept of inversion right from the off, she just says, try not to think about it, just feel it. And to me, it feels like Nolan kind of hits on that point twice in this film, and just have fun and try and enjoy it and take what you can out of it.
Not to advertise, but this book came out today, which I've read approximately 1.5 pages from. Page 1 is the idea. And as the 20 years ago thing you mentioned, he just said he had this image of a wall and someone just pulling bullets out of it for a gun. And the opening scene, not the opening scene, sorry, the wall scene when he learns it, I'm imagining that's the image he had in his head for 20 years, because it kind of reminds me of this like fundamental block. Like, you see that wall with the bullets in, and they build the scene around that. And it's, again, that concept which he's picked at over as time's gone by and evolved in. That's where I think, going to characters, the weakness of said characters, it's because on paper, he's not done the characters first. I think he's done his concept and idea, and then applied that to elements he likes from, as he keeps saying, now espionage films, not the Bond films. Maybe for other reasons, we can't keep saying Bond. But we spoke a lot about the protagonists. So going off of him, in terms of his arc, I feel like he gets more interesting. His best scene, I think, is his penultimate scene with Rob Pattinson when they're doing the talking. In terms of acting, physicality, he's there throughout. And Nolan said, he used to watch Ballers, which is completely blown my mind. I cannot imagine. If anyone's watched Ballers, you know exactly what I mean. When Chris Nolan says in an interview, I watched Ballers, that's astounded me. That's not the kind of thing I ever imagined him watching. Because obviously he was also going to be NFL. He got an injury, had to pull out, went into acting, and he kind of said that physically he's there, and my protagonist had to be a physically made actor that can do everything he needs to do in this film. And even jump back, obviously you've got your action scenes, but when you think about it, there's sailing, there's the pull-ups, there's a lot of things that, physically over probably a 4 or 5 month period of filming, I don't think there's, not saying too many people couldn't do it, but that's a lot of action on one main character. Even your support one was like, Rob Pattinson's got a couple of set pieces here and there, but no one's as constant as the protagonist. So that's where, when we mentioned being two-dimensional, that's where the angle I'm coming from, is that he's there for those reasons. I'm still invested in him, but it's more the story of, it's like, again, going back to Bond, you're invested in the story being done following that character, but it's the people you meet on the way that make him more interesting, which kind of pushes me towards Neil's side, where in terms of ambiguous characters, from his opening scene of sitting down in the chair next to him, telling him he already knows his favorite drink, he doesn't drink on the job, the things like that, his backwards reverse theme, which I need to investigate tonight because the soundtrack's now out, to the wild theory, which I'm going in on the ball straight away. I've thought since the opening, the final few minutes of the first screening, I think he's Katzin in the future. It's ambiguous as hell. The theory works. There's some aging involved. That everything that film sets up. Screening 1, I was like, oh, how does he know these things? Screening 2, which I was like, oh, okay, I'm not concentrating more, but I'm figuring this out. And okay, that's why he knows that. That's why he knows that. But there are still gaps which could be filled by that. And I think it's that very ambiguous. Chris, you mentioned to me the wedding ring theory from Inception's comparison. That I think this is something, I checked Reddit last week. A couple of people were onto it on release day. I think this is going to be a big one. But that's this monumental thing that, as an ambiguity goes, following protagonist, that if he does see this kid grow up and hire him to go backwards in time, ultimately knowing he's going to die as well because he has to. They say at the end of the film, the whole thing was a temporal pincer. How many decades it went on for, we don't know. But aside from even the theory, I thought Rob Pattinson was tremendous in this. Obviously, we found he's got coronavirus an hour ago, so Batman's got a couple of weeks delay now. But in this film, he is phenomenal. I want to see him in more Nolan films. He just had this charisma. Him and John David Washington seemed like they had a genuine bond. It didn't feel like some of his films where, Chris, you mentioned mainly Catwoman and Bruce Wayne, like you don't get that connection. Mm-hmm. Certainly these two, it just felt like two mates, running a building together and things like that.
Yeah, it was really, really natural. And a lot of people, the one that everyone goes to with Robert Pattinson is Twilight, but a lot of the people who defend him always keep saying The Lighthouse, like you need to see him in The Lighthouse, but The Lighthouse is a very
good.
Yeah,
really good time.
He's amazing in that film, but it is a sort of very low budget, kind of borderline indie film, I would say. It's not the kind of movie that everyone's going to hear, whereas Tenet, major release from probably one of the most prolific directors of this century. He is now front and center. He is like second build in this film. So I'm hoping this film, more than anything, gets him more in the limelight. He's got Batman coming out next year. So for all those naysayers, the Batman trailers come out. A lot of people are on board with him. They look like they're very positive towards his portrayal. And I hope his role in this film kind of cements that for his career going forwards and allows him to be seen differently. But no, I really like Neil's character. And the more layers you sort of peel back away, second, third viewing, you start going into the theories more. And it's quite interesting, the Max theory, because you spoke to me like as we were watching first view, and you kind of turned to me and you went, that little kid's going to be Robert Pattinson's character. And as soon as you said that, I kind of kept that theory in my head throughout the rest of the film, and it still all made sense. For the sense that I could make on my first viewing, it made sense in like certain moments. There's moments where he's very attentive at Kat's bedside. True. Like, I think it's ambiguous. I think you could view it that he is just naturally caring and wants to save her. It's another human being, but you could look at it that is actually his mom, and that's why he has that connection. And the one that you told me about, George, is the name Maximilian. You get the last four letters of the name, reverse them. What does it spell? Neil. So I think there's a lot to there. I think Nolan's planted a few things in there. I did kind of hope that the very final shot of the movie with little kid Max walking off with his backpack, you'd see like a little red tag on the back of that backpack, which that would have spelt it out for everyone. I think the theory is definitely there. I think there are arguments for and against why that theory is a thing or can't be a thing. But if it is a thing, then it completely changes the dynamic between Neil and the protagonist's characters and friendship, because what we was told as a friendship now almost becomes like a kind of father figure and I would say like a watchful guardian kind of thing from another Nolan film. But it completely changes the dynamic if that theory is true. And the fact that that theory is out there, that you're not the only one who thought of it, George. There's other people out there who also thought it too. There's articles that you can read. There's everything. There's all kinds of Reddit posts. I think it's all there in the subtext, and you can kind of pick that up more and appreciate it more. But no, I really like Neil's character. I thought he had a lot of natural charm to his character. And he was probably... I do like the villain side of things more in Debicki, but in terms of the main two leads, I definitely gravitated more towards Neil. And I think you kind of have to as well, because he is that ambiguous, enigmatic character.
I was going to say, I think with the theory side of things, I think there's going to be so many that comes out when people are actually able to like pause the film and look at it and analyze it and stuff like that. So I think, I mean, I hadn't even thought of that, but now it's kind of in my head. I'm thinking that's reasonably flawless. I can't think of anything that kind of stops that theory.
Hair as well, a little bit as well, visually, I guess.
And he's dyed his hair blonde for the film when he's a brown hair person, so I don't know if that's too much. But I don't think there's too many theories for this film, though. I will say, I don't think we get the 10. I don't know.
We all know there will be more. Like
I think this is
quite... for Inception nowadays. So
I know it sounds silly because I've got like 13 pages of notes and a timeline in front of me, what I've conjured up over the last 8 days. But I think this is straightforward. I don't think this is an Inception. What does this mean? What does that mean? I think this is far easier than that. That's why I'm leaning again towards that Memento comparison, where once it's laid out, it's linear. It's not ambiguity for that. And I think the only legit thing there is the Rob Pattinson thing. And not to be smug and arrogant, that's not my aim. But the fact that I'm quite happy that I thought that in my head, and I didn't have to see it on Reddit or something like that first. That helped the case. Like, okay, I'm not the only one that has this majestical idea, but that's there, and that's something like, I know that is actually really arrogant, isn't it? But it's more that, you know, it's like
no comment.
No, I'll tell you what. It's more arrogant. It's more arrogant saying that you completely understood the film first time round, which I did with the person who
I know some people that have. I know some people that have.
I know one person that has, who is my manager at work, who is not watching this, because he messaged me on Tuesday morning, line A, so is Rob Pattinson the son. He got that theory first time. That's the only person I know that's got it first time. My dad was like 3/4 there, I think. He got a lot better at it than I did. But I didn't say I got that first time at all. That's why last week I didn't have a clue.
What I was saying was people understanding just the film the first time around completely, being able to map everything out and understand everything. Like, because
some people can.
Yeah, I was with someone when they did, and I was like, that's just mental. Like, how? But anyway, swinging back round to Robert Pattinson. I'm so glad that both him and what's her face, Kristen Stewart, have done so well since Twilight, because that really could have killed off their careers and people wouldn't have even cared. But both of them have recovered really, really well and gone on to do better projects, shall we say, to give their kind of acting career a bit more credibility. I have a feeling that Robert Pattinson's he's gonna kick on, especially from this film now. I mean, he's got Batman coming out. That's going to be a massive thing. But I don't think many people realize that he is actually English. I think I mentioned this in the spoiler-free review. But people always thought he was American. He's an English actor. Same with, what's his face? Superman. Can't think of his name now. Henry Cavill. Yeah, people didn't think that he was... People thought, oh, he's Superman. He's American. No, very English. But I gravitated more towards his character way more than the protagonist. I think it was nice to have at least a character who didn't really know what was going on, but he very clearly knew what was going on, as we found out towards the end, but kind of playing innocent and not really being in the know, and kind of having the information passed down to him secondhand, so at least he's having the information taught to him. But I really enjoyed his performance. To be honest, as far as performance is concerned, I mean, Elizabeth Debicki, like we've already said this in the spoiler-free, was phenomenal in this film.
She was
I need
fantastic.
to see her in other stuff as well now. I need to keep an eye out for her. I know she's doing The Crown, but I'm just going to have a look through. She was in Great Gatsby. She was in Widows. I haven't seen Widows yet. She was Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 as the gold chick. I don't remember her being in Everest, but she seems to have popped up in quite a lot of these kind of different films, and it kind of makes you think, like, wow, okay, possibly one to watch in the future then, because she was brilliant in this film. And then Kenneth Branagh, who always gives fantastic performances in literally everything he's in, a very different performance from what we've seen in other films. I think we all said that in the spoiler-free review, but his character is just... I found him more frightening the second time than I did the first time, which I wasn't expecting at all.
He steals it. Elizabeth Debicki's great. She's phenomenal in this. To Chris, a message that I think she's the best written female character from a Nolan film. There's not many of them, which has been a criticism of his career. And then he puts us in a great situation with, rather than a dead wife, we've got a potentially almost dead wife character. And I think she's great. I love the fact that we all know she's 6'3", and people don't mock it, but it's kind of like a running gag online that she's really tall. How's she going to be in films and stuff? And even from like the wardrobe choices, like they use height as like a character trait, like from the costume design and everything, that it feels like
and stuff like that. It's
the fact that obviously the ultimate set piece is that she unlocks the car door. That, like, let's be honest, people will be like, that can't be real. It's like, well, it is, because she's 6'3". She could unlock that door. I think she's great. She's the most interesting. That comes down to her pairing with Sir Kenneth Branagh, who, to me, not just like Gilderoy Lockhart in the Chamber of Secrets, this man stole this film for different reasons. You're absolutely right. He's intimidating the first time around. I said he's a genuinely terrifying villain. And every word he said is kind of like a weapon. You get a sense, and that comes down to Elizabeth Debicki and the people around him, that this is a villain you should fear because everyone fears him. He's the kind of omnipotence, that he is the all-powerful because he knows he can end the world, because he knows everything about the future. And you really get a vibe to that across him. And there are scenes where he's likable, where he is having a nice discussion in one or two moments with John David Washington. But you also know at the same time that, he actually might chop his balls off and put them into his windpipe and stuff. So it added this dynamic, which I've certainly not seen in a Nolan film from a villain. But also I know this would have been 15 in England, and it's cut 9 seconds out due to domestic abuse. Not hard to guess which character that was for. I just thought he was phenomenal. I loved him, every line, the accent as well. This is what we kind of laughed at, bar the awful sailing audio. You can make out Kenneth Branagh, the Irishman playing a Russian, is clearer than most of the sort of American accents, I guess, is a kind of like running gag. Mm-hmm. But I think he steals this. He is worthy of his own area we kind of say he's the only person that came in from Dunkirk. Nolan pretty much brought in, bar Michael Caine, and a completely new cast. There is a little cameo which we can talk about later on. But what a person to bring back. And it's the fact it's not a villain that's young and fit, athletic, and he's going to have a fight to the death with him. This is a guy that knows he's going to die. He's accepted death as a weapon, and that weapon is that he can end the world. And I think that's far more frightening concept than some guy that's going to have a 20-second fight at the end and get battered by a younger, fitter protagonist. I think that works.
Yeah, no, he's a really intriguing character, especially when we get to the end and we kind of understand his absolute end goal plan and why the way that he views the world and himself as well as this kind of, he has a god complex. He says at the end, like, if he's going to die, he's going to take the world with him. And it's the exchange over the phone at the end with John David Washington. He says, like, you'll be a madman, and he says, or a god. And that's how he sees himself. Complete narcissism and everything between. And I can't even talk. Kenneth Branagh plays it beautifully. I've always loved the guy. He's an absolute national treasure. And Gilderoy Lockhart, we've memed him enough on the channel, but the praise is there for his character and everything he's been in. He's always brilliant. But this is a side to Kenneth Branagh I have never seen before. I have never seen him. Maybe he has played villains before. I mean, I haven't seen the entire guy's filmography or anything, but a villain to this level who is completely unpredictable. 1 minute he is, he's about to, commit domestic abuse and everything like that is absolutely horrible. And then George, as you said, like, he'll just calmly and collectively sit at the table. And that's what makes him so terrifying, is you never know when he's gonna, everything he's capable of, and that's terrifying in itself. But in terms of his actual personality and how he carries himself, it's very, very intriguing. So I loved it. To me, he was the standout character. I thought he was a fantastic villain. I don't want to keep going back to the Bond comparisons, but
I was going to say as well, with the Bond comparison, like
an evil Russian megalomaniac, who has a nuclear bomb, who's going to set it off and destroy the world. I mean, that's a Bond villain right there.
Here's the thing: none of the Bond villains are as frightening as his character in this film.
No,
like, I mean, we've already kind of said, Christopher Nolan and Bond films, will he make one and stuff like that. If this is his idea of how to make a Bond film and have his own unique twist on it and have a spy thriller with the threat of world-ending destruction off a maniacal evil villain, it's bonkers, but it kind of works in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
It really does. And no Bond villain comes, I mean, they all used to be quite campy and stuff like that, but even the modern ones where they've tried to go for that kind of hardened Jason Bourne style Bond kind of films, none of the villains have come even close to kind of the amount of terror that he gives off on the screen, and that's all just from his acting. That is all acting. Is from the characterization of him as well. It's just fantastic. He was the best actor on the screen. Easily.
Yeah, I think her and Debicki, I mean, I mentioned this in my spoiler free, and that still stands now that I've seen it a bunch of times. Their dynamic together, and even her on her own as well. I want to talk a little bit about her a bit more, because we've sort of like glossed over her, but she does play, she has like loads of sides to her, and she just plays each of them brilliantly. She has the femme fatale side to her, which we see when she comes into her own more towards the end of the film. There are moments in the film where she is kind of, I don't want to say she's the damsel in distress, but there is a scene where he does need to rescue her in a car, and then she gets injured for the most of it. But then what that sort of leads to at the very end with the final confrontation, she had the most satisfying character arc to me out of the whole film. She's the very put upon wife, just victim of domestic abuse, no way out, wants escape, but is trapped there with the leverage that he has with the painting that he has, and she's trying to stay there for her son as well and look after him and be motherly. So there's a lot of different sides to her, and I think that she plays them with pitch perfect ease, and I can't wait to see more films from her. The only film that I've seen, well, other than Guardians of the Galaxy, but she wasn't a huge part in that film, was Widows, a film that I didn't really care for, but she was the standout for me in that film. So seeing her in this, she is going to be an actress that I am going to be looking into as she brings more films out following this one. So the villain side of things I thought was definitely the strongest for the characters. I think that's really it for characters. The only other ones you get some side characters in there.
The fact that on first viewing I didn't realize it was Aaron Taylor Johnson until the credits.
I knew that it was Aaron Taylor Johnson.
I didn't realize it was him. I mean, I haven't really seen him in many films at all. But I've always got him in my mind as Kick-Ass, so I've always imagined him with this kind of, like, long curly hair and stuff like that. So I didn't even recognize it in the face, to be honest. That's how long it's been since I've seen him in a film. I didn't even realize it at all until the credits rolled up and it was like, Aaron Taylor Johnson, who was that? And I was like, holy shit, was that soldier dude? I was like,
he does show up very late in the film. He does sort of show up around like the 3/4 mark of the film.
I'm still convinced that was like Tom Hardy's role, and he wasn't free to draft someone in. It was like the arrogant soldier, the one with the beard, the cap, and everything, who's this like physical like leader, and that's a Tom Hardy role in another film. And Tom Hardy was filming Venom 2.
Especially because in the end scene, he becomes kind of a prominent role. He is one of the 3 people who has to kind of disperse the thing. So you could almost see him as one of the 3 kind of main protagonists of that kind of area of the film, which is crazy. Also, I want to give a shout out here once again to Himesh Patel, who played Mahir, who's actually on a good run at the moment. I mean, he did Yesterday a few years ago, or was that last year? Yesterday came out.
It was last year, I think.
Last year. But it's good to see him in another film as well. Good to see that people can actually have a career after doing soap operas. So there you go.
Yeah. And you have some other talent in there as well. Let me just bring up the names.
Michael Caine for one.
Michael Caine, resident Michael Caine in a Christopher Nolan film, and you have the actress who plays Priya as well. I am going to try and attempt the name. I don't know if I'm going to absolutely slaughter it, but Dimple Kapadia, I think, is how you pronounce it.
I've not seen much of Bollywood, but I know she's like Bollywood royalty. So when she was cast in this was humongous, because the jump you don't get is Bollywood to Hollywood. Vice versa, you very rarely get that. That's why I think she had more of a prominent role than most people have realized. I can imagine marketing-wise, sort of in Asia, it would have all been her everywhere, every shot, everything, because she kind of is important, I guess. Like, she's not marketed.
She's important.
She is important, and ultimately the final scene is her the loose end as well. So there is that dynamic going to her, and I think she's okay. I think when the sound mixing issues come in, a lot of people's mentioned her voice as well. And that has been a struggle at times. I think it's the settings of it. Again, we spoke about the sailing scene. When you've got a boat and docks in a busy place, streets, cars and everything, it sometimes made it a little harder to hear her. And that's the same for anyone else. I don't think it was as bad on her in terms of mixing as some scenes, because they didn't tend to blast the soundtrack over the top, which they do a lot of the time in the film. Most of the time it's for a good thing. But in this, I don't think we got enough from her to care about her character. I think that's my honest opinion on it, is that she has this integral role. It's a nice sort of switcheroo that, in a male-dominated industry, to be the female. And I love that little, I wouldn't even say support twist. That was this neat little, he's my tenant, he lives by my rules. That was just a neater switch than here's a typical boring arms dealer that we need to find out who he's supplying the bullets to. It just gave it this edge, and as obviously they go back in time, when you get back to her where she's playing him the entire time, I think there's a little bit more to it there, and I'd like that dynamic, but I don't think I had enough from her to care about her character. Yeah,
no, I'll agree with that. And then really the only other character, George, I'm going to pass back over to you, because you were the one who noticed this, a cameo from a very, very, the first Christopher Nolan film, the first short film and the first feature.
Absolutely. So the actor, I don't even know if he's acted. He's called Jeremy Theobald. He was one of Christopher Nolan's close friends. and he co-produced Following with Nolan, as well as starring in it in the lead. Now, if you join us at the beginning of the month, we found out he was in Batman Begins, and it was a big surprise when we watched Batman Begins after, and oh my god, it's that guy from The Following for like 1 second, and I didn't notice this till viewing 3. There was a whimper in the voice. I thought, that sounds a bit sort of veering. You know, he plays the waiter at the restaurant, and so it sounds familiar. And then you see it in the eyes. I was like, that's the guy from Following, because of course he's in Doodlebug as well, which is you know, close-ups and all that kind of stuff. And I kind of came up like, is that him? Is that him? And I gave it a Google, and he's credited now on IMDb. And in that one page I read of that book, he's front and center as well. That they've said to him that they mentioned the key thing is that he was a co-producer, not just an actor in Following. So that was neat because, you know, he's not had a cameo in every film. He's known Michael Caine, but why not bring him back? So that was a really nice little, I don't know if it's an Easter egg because, you know, he did look like a waiter. I guess he played that role to a point. But that was just a nice little throwback. And if that is one of his mates, you can imagine that being like a friendly, like, I brought Michael Caine in to play Sir Michael as well. That's his literal character name. Who's actually got a very important... Michael Caine scene is arguably some of the most important scene in the film. Without delving into the plot too much, it actually teases the finale of the film, which we can get later on. But I think that's pretty much it for characters with me.
Yep, same here. I think we need to move on to what is probably the loudest thing in the movie. Definitely is the music, the soundtrack, which was released today. I have listened to it twice. And definitely when I'm driving, that soundtrack's going to be lethal. Soundtrack, of course, not done by Hans Zimmer this time. He was busy doing Wonder Woman and Dune, so he couldn't do the soundtrack to this film. Ludwig Goransson takes the helm this time in terms of the music. In all honesty, probably if you asked average Joe on the street, if you didn't tell them that Hans Zimmer wasn't doing the music to this film, it does sound very Zimmer-esque. There's a lot of sort of Inception kind of sounds in there. It's a very synth-heavy soundtrack, but it is quite an intriguing one in how it matches the film. You have entire portions of music and weird sort of electronic sounds that you probably haven't heard before that are reversed themselves. It creates a very sort of uneasy, disconnected, choppy kind of soundtrack, but it very much works for the film. It does kind of have those sort of generic sort of Inception bombs in there. There's a good couple of those in the soundtrack, which seem to be unavoidable now in not just any Nolan film, but any conventional modern day action film. There's some nice ambient stuff in there too. I don't know if it's one of my favorite Nolan soundtracks, but it definitely fits the film. And when the energy's there and those action set pieces are kicking in, the soundtrack is a beautiful, albeit very loud accompaniment to those scenes.
It's what we've kind of said, that the soundtrack to a Nolan film is almost an additional character. In this one, the character has sometimes dialogue over other characters' dialogue. When they said Hans Zimmer wasn't coming back, I was very nervous, as obviously many Nolan fans were. To me, they're a power duo. They are like this generation Spielberg and John Williams. You just assume they're going to be together on everything because that's how they work with one another. And actually, in Empire Today, Hans Zimmer spoke about the Dune thing. And when they were working on Blade Runner, Hans Zimmer spoke to Denis Villeneuve saying how he was a big fan of Dune. The film hadn't been announced at this point. Denis Villeneuve spoke back saying he'd love to direct a Dune film, and then Hans Zimmer said, if you ever do want to do it, I've basically waited my entire life to do a Dune soundtrack. Here's some examples of what I've already conjured up. After that conversation, Denis Villeneuve approached Warner Brothers saying, I want to make Dune, and Hans Zimmer's my composer. Hans Zimmer is ultimately responsible for Dune potentially being released, which is remarkable. A composer was able to get that out of him. So it's completely understandable. And I've got to kind of put the conversation back. Completely get why Zimmer didn't want to come back. If he's waited his entire life for that one soundtrack, don't think there's anything wrong with him missing one Nolan film. However, Ludwig Göransson won the Oscar for Black Panther. To me, it's one of my favourite soundtracks last few years. It felt so different, felt so unique, and it matched the film perfectly. Then we get The Mandalorian, which is, as everyone knows, it's not an easy step to getting into Star Wars, let alone doing a Star Wars soundtrack and not doing big brass instruments. Here's the theme, here's this, here's that. And overall, the Mandalorian soundtrack's pretty great. We have the Rocky comparison we laugh at. So he did do Creed as well. But the Mandalorian proved to me that felt so unique, so different to Star Wars. It helped Mandalorian stand out from the rest of the Star Wars things. It has its own sound, its own theme, great theme. And I was really sort of excited for this soundtrack. And the moment I saw the prologue, even back in December last year at Star Wars, that music's been in my head for almost a year now. And you cannot imagine my relief when Spotify refreshed at 8 a.m. this morning when I started work, the first song went on was the prologue soundtrack bit. I thought the soundtrack was phenomenal. Because the film doesn't have the emotion that Something Saying Exception does, you don't have that sort of theme within the character. But the one thing that stood out for me, and this is the inversion of the soundtrack, he's actually tweeted that today as well, that some of the soundtrack's inverted. This is kind of blame it because they did it behind the scenes on the Mandalorian soundtrack, and he kind of explained his process. He has his own sort of 20-minute special where he does the generic, he has everyone in his studio, he has his notes, they compose it, but then what he does, he takes what's composed and he plays with it on an editing suite. He does whatever he wants to do with it, and that's how he can create these new sounds and whatnot. Certainly this, having seen that behind the scenes on Mandalorian, now I can imagine him with this score that he's then said, I'm going to reverse this song, I'm going to do this, do that. And I think he's been able to conjure up something so unique, that almost Zimmer-esque to the point. Certainly you've got the Boams in the Boeing scene more than anything, I would say. Mm-hmm. But the other sounds, they seem like they would be suited for this film. And I don't think you could take a sound from this and put it on another Nolan film the same you couldn't put the Interstellar soundtrack on Dunkirk, Inception, that kind of vibe where it feels the right soundtrack for a Nolan film, but not the kind of soundtrack anyone else can do. And it completely blew me away. Obviously it's very techno heavy. The car chase, the truck sequence, the prologue, the villain theme we were talking about before we went live. There's so much to this, and the key thing I need to figure out tonight is Neil's theme, Kat's theme reversed, because if it is, the theory stands. Because Neil's theme is played in reverse. If you listen to that, that is in reverse. The moment he sits down, that's where it sounds differently. And this is the whole Mandalorian thing where, he's composed this and he's took it home and he's changed a couple of things and he's reversed it and he's had his fun. And I think that added a new dynamic. I couldn't imagine Hans Zimmer editing his soundtrack at home in his suite, in his apartment. But that's what Ludwig Goransson does. And it's so unique. I honestly can't wait to read it in the book, to find out on the behind the scenes stuff when it comes out on the Blu-ray. There's so much going on. It's already one of my favorite Nolan soundtracks, and there's already so many to say that to as well.
And Christopher Nolan's heavy breathing on Sator's theme.
That's the weirdest. It's like, in Dunkirk, I'm going to use my own pocket watch, and then it's like one film later, heavy breathing intensifies, which is the breathing in the Sator theme for people that want to listen to that song and get creeped out when you're social distancing at home.
The soundtrack did immediately jump out to me, but maybe that was because it was much louder than the rest of the film itself. But even from the opening sequence with the opera, you're immediately whoa, okay, this is getting me into it and stuff like that. The music really did help with a lot of. I know you said that this wasn't a very emotional soundtrack, but I'd say this was almost an overly emotional soundtrack. This absolutely got me in the mood for the film. It absolutely kept my heart rate going. It kept me going forwards with the plot and stuff like that. It did feel like an extra character, as you guys said already. I think one bit of music, which for me was my personal favorite from the film, was the truck kind of chase scene type thing. Just when it builds up and builds up and builds up, and you can almost feel like you're there in the scene just because the music is putting you there. That really kind of both viewings stood out for me. But yeah, I want to have a listen into the soundtrack separate from the film as well, and see kind of how it compares to my experience with other Nolan soundtracks. I wouldn't put it as my favorite immediately, because Inception is already way above that, and so is Interstellar as well. They're on a completely different plane. But I will say it is up there already. It is up there.
Definitely. And you talked about the truck scene there with the music. That's probably a very nice segue to take us on to set pieces, because this film has, in my opinion, some of the best among any film I've seen recently, action film certainly, but definitely Christopher Nolan film for me. The set pieces in this film were astounding, and I can't wait to get the Blu-ray. I mentioned this last time, and see that there's been little bits released, little 5 minutes here, little 10 minutes here, but the actual, I need to see the full thing. My favorite set piece in the whole film, and yes, the car chase is fantastic. Seeing cars inverted in regular speed and both of them at the same time, it's amazing. The ending needs a whole discussion in itself, because that's just Jesus. Yeah. But for me, it was the hand-to-hand fight at Oslo, where the protagonist is fighting the protagonist. There's round 1 and round 2, and I'm not sure which is my favorite. It's probably round 2. The fact that I can't even imagine the thought process behind that. That we're gonna choreograph a fight scene, and all the stunt guys are like, right, excellent, fantastic. Walk in the park, it's like backwards, and you need to make it work, and it still needs to work with the person throwing punches forward, and it needs to look somewhat natural, like they're still in a thing. And then obviously, when you show that scene again the second time, it needs to match perfectly what you did the first time. I can't even get my head around how you've got like a blank piece of paper. I don't know how you start with an idea like that. Like, what do you do? Do you just like practice some moves? There are some things out there where you can see them doing some kind of like backwards combat rolls and things like that, and throwing punches in reverse, but it's like a dance when you watch it, as any good fight scene should be, whether you watch The Raid or any kind of film like that, or John Wick. But this was so different. I love the backwards movements are really unsettling and look really unnatural, but maybe some of those were augmented, but what it looks like, it was all done in camera, which is amazing. I've never seen, and I mentioned this as well, Nolan's very good at this, where I go and see one of his films and I come away and go, I haven't seen anything like that before. All of the inverted sequences. I guess you could say Red Dwarf. I did discover that whole Red Dwarf backwards bar scene before recording this review. So maybe I have seen it in stuff before, but to this scale and what they did, I mean, the fact that crashing a Boeing 747 isn't even the highlight of the film for me. Usually that's like the one big action set piece, whether it's blowing up a hospital in The Dark Knight or flipping a truck. Well, I guess flipping a truck in The Dark Knight. But he usually has that big one centerpiece the whole way, flip from Inception. That's probably the one from this, the 747. But to me, a simple hand-to-hand fight stole the show for me. And then obviously there's the entire ending, which needs its own topic.
Yeah. So for me, when I first watched this scene, my immediate first thought was, because obviously we see the protagonist having to fight himself on one side, and we didn't really know that at the time, but Neil runs off with the same person who's just kind of been inverted and is running back. I originally thought that was Neil in the suit, and I thought he was a double agent, and I thought there was going to be a massive twist that he was actually working for Sator, and that was going to be like the big twist in the end, because I saw him peel off the helmet and then just let him go, and I thought, is that Neil? Has he just met himself? Has he is that the kind of thing? But alas, I was wrong. But the set piece itself, I have to agree with you. It is the best set piece in the film, and it is so simple a concept, but so difficult to kind of put on screen, and must have taken so much effort to actually do. I've seen a bit of behind the scenes, seeing John David Washington choreographing, like punching backwards and stuff like that, and make it look like he's having to fight in reverse, which is ridiculous. But it looked
that it's the same fight twice, but the two feel so completely different. It does feel like you are watching two different fight scenes, even though it's exactly the same. It's incredible how they could do that.
I do have to ask, because I don't know whether I would have picked up on it or not. Did they use different camera angles on the second version of the fight, or was it the same?
They filmed it twice, so they filmed the fight once forwards for obviously the first one, and then fight 2 is filmed backwards. So I believe John David Washington did. I don't know if he did the whole stunts for this, but he's in it. He's in that fight, but he did everything. So it's himself and I would assume a stunt double or another stunt fighter that was in the costume. So he had to learn the entire fight twice, once to do backwards, once to do forwards. And I think this fight is a masterpiece, because the one thing that's grabbed me, the more I've seen it, is if you even look at the narrative of each fight, look at fight 1. So it's himself in the present, obviously fighting the inverted. And he's losing this fight, right? When he picks up, he's getting battered. He's almost been shot. He doesn't really get a grasp of it until probably 3/4 of the way through, getting used to the paintings, to the floor, to the gun. So that's this observation I had. And then I thought, then you flip on its head and you look at the fight, and they come back to it later on. And John David Washington realizes he's fighting himself. And if you look at the beginning of fight 2, because he's so out of it, he doesn't know what's going on. He is losing the fight, and halfway through, he then begins, okay, this is how I can win this fight. So he begins to win as well. And obviously, he ultimately wins because he jumps through, comes out the other end. Now, that's the same fight, but he's won and lost both because he learns how to fight halfway through, even though he's fighting himself. I don't know if I'm waffling at this point, but it's an incredible observation I had there. although it's the same fight, there are two narratives to the entire thing, and it each begins with him coming in vulnerable and him ending up winning. He wins each fight ultimately, even though it's against himself, and that just blew me away.
And just the concept of a fight alone, that there is no better equally matched fight than fighting yourself. When you are like a trained fighter, your best opponent would be yourself. It's kind of like not to go on a Star Wars tangent, but like Anakin versus Obi-Wan, like the master has trained this with everything that he knows. That's why they're equally matched in that fight. And I don't know, I always love fights like that, but I honestly haven't seen a fight like this. This would have probably have made it onto Battle of the Brackets for me as one of my best moments, probably. Or indeed should we talk about the car chase first before moving into the whole ending thing that happens?
Yeah.
I called it when I watched it and I saw the car flip. I was like, that's going to be him in the car in a minute. But even saying that, I didn't quite expect it when you actually seeing is believing. And, we get that introduction to the world, and that's great. There is something that you mentioned. I don't know if it was one of your friends, George, who mentioned it, who has a scientific mind where everything's inverted in the inverted world. Heat becomes cold, cold becomes hot. Shouldn't day become night and night become day because energy is reversed? So the car chase in the inverted world should be at night time because of the reversed energy. I get why they didn't do that, because you couldn't really film it effectively like that. But if you are staying true to the world, or maybe it's limited to certain aspects, because I know the nuclear bomb at the end talks about reversing the entire entropy of the whole world. So maybe it's not quite that advanced to take on that thing. Maybe it's restricted to a certain amount. But this car chase is just incredible. From basically take it all the way back to the start of the truck thing, where the trucks wedge the van in with the plutonium. From that moment onwards, you play out this fantastic car chase scene, and then the interrogation scene, the way that I view it, and it's almost like a mirror, reflected like a mirror image. That is the midpoint where then you get most of the inverted stuff following it. You follow it straight back with the car chase again. Same car chase from a different angle, adds a completely different layer to it. I love both. To me, that is one of the best directed and photographed action scenes out of any Nolan film for me.
It's more, I remember that about a year ago, I tend not to look at behind the scenes for films, but there was a video like, you must see what's happening on the new Nolan film, and it was the motorway, and everything was going in reverse at a steady speed, and there was one car bombing through. I remember looking at it like, nah, like that's just typical. That's the point we've reached. It's like, okay, he goes again. How on earth does this do it? And then you watch that, and it's not even the fact it's the car chase followed by the inverted car chase. It's the fact there's a heist just before it. And you mentioned the music earlier. Absolutely. In that scene, the music kicks in. Like, every time I've watched it since, like, I'm in sync, like sort of tapping my leg. Like, the scene's coming. The song starts, you start to get pumped, and it's the build-up. It's the truck, the fire, and everything building up. And then Rob Pattinson's mini little countdown of his really over. I know he's English, but he does overemphasize the accent in this to be the proper posh English. Obviously, the theory, the kids at a posh private school in London, let that build up. It's just phenomenal. And it's the fact you can have these set pieces after set pieces, and you do get the interrogation, but when you kind of build up going into inversion, like you look at these films, look at video games, it's like, this is okay, take the helmet. It's like Tron, take the helmet, put this on your back, get out there and fight. He gets his mini speech about inversion, and you're just there with him, like, what on earth's going on? I'm lost now, because you've just had the interrogation as well. And then, like, the car's reversing, and it's him all along, and they're fighting. Kenneth Branagh's eyes pop out. One of my favorite shots of the entire film. The whole thing is majestical. And this is the thing, like, as you mentioned, there's a Boeing 747, a real one, getting blown up in this film at a real live airports. And I don't think I can put that in my top 3 scenes, which is just unbelievable to say the lowest point. But yeah, and not to move ever so slightly, the one thing we're not spoke about is the prologue. Don't just delve into it too much in terms of story, but in terms of action, I think this is one of Nolan's best sort of action set pieces. I know it's the prologue, it's like the Dark Knight, here's a small story set within itself, but the whole heist thing, from the fake sort of labels on the arms to we're getting introduced to this, to the action, the shooting in sync, the siege mentality, the gas, the mass, I just loved it. It felt like the Dark Knight Rises, the sort of the robbery of the stock exchange, like on steroids. I thought that was one of my favorite sort of action set pieces. Very different one. But the truck scene to me is the big point. It needs to be at the halfway point. It should be halfway. It shouldn't be at the end. It wouldn't have been fitting at the end. But this sort of mini heist halfway through that actually has ramifications on the story too is not just there for the sake of spectacle. I think makes it even better.
Yeah, definitely. Tate, do you have anything extra
Yeah,
to add?
I've already talked about the car chase and stuff like that, but it's a fantastic set piece. And this film in general just is a good string of action set pieces. And the only thing that I think can improve it is if there was more character in between, more character moments, and more given into the film. Yeah. It's that and the sound mixing, obviously. That is the only thing. And we know that in Nolan films in the past, there has been that problem with like maybe the character's not being emotional enough. But I mean, we've seen it in all of his other films, just not on a big scale. And I think this film needed some kind of personal connection in there, something more than I guess Elizabeth Debicki's love for her son, stuff like that, because that was really the only emotional connection that we were given between any characters in the entire film. And we didn't really even get to see the son speak. We didn't actually get to see the son really at all. So it's very difficult to convey that emotion across because there's no scene of her like hugging the child after maybe she's been beaten or something like that. So you get that connection and stuff like that. You don't see that connection in the first place. So how are you meant to connect with the character in that way? It's very difficult. And that's
I can see that. I can see that.
Isn't that like Cobb? You don't see him hug his kids till...
No,
he's on the phone to them towards the beginning and he hears their voices, and there's a little bit more. There's a shred more in Inception, I'd say.
On the other side, kind of pushing it and stuff like that. She talks about the kids, and they talk about the kids throughout the entire film, but you keep on getting the memory flashbacks and stuff like that to hit the moment where he basically says goodbye to his kids and stuff like that. I mean, even in his memories, he goes back to the kids on the beach. He goes back to the kids at the house and stuff like that.
I think it's for potentially a very good sequel to Tenet that could go into that moment where you do see that friendship with Neil and John David Washington. You'd have to have a very aged up John David Washington, or just cast his father. It'd be a bit weird. It'd be kind of like a middle finger to John David Washington, because I do think he acts it very well in this film. It might take you out of the whole friendship thing, recasting, but I don't know, because I think that if you had that as like a supplementary piece, and then you could watch that, which would both serve as a prequel and a sequel at the same time. I mean, that in itself is just right. So, and maybe at the end of that, John David Washington could die. So it is itself. I don't know. There's an idea there. Whether he'll do it, I don't know. He'll probably do like about 2 or 3 movies in between before he even considers doing something like that. But I do think the room's there. And this is just a concept in a world that I would like to see more things in. The inverted stuff for me is definitely the best. And if we're going to talk about one more set piece, we've got to talk about the ending. I have seen things you people wouldn't believe, to quote Blade Runner. There are things that happen during this final sequence that I have never witnessed in a film. The best one, the one that sticks out in my mind, probably a lot of people's mind, is the building that simultaneously repairs itself and explodes. It's incredible. The choreography, just in general, just the logistics of making sure those actors are running backwards and the continuity of that and the people running forwards. I was trying to wrap my head around the concept in that how can one team member run in and tell the other team what had happened when both of them happened simultaneously anyway, like where they both communicate and say, right, one person needs to shoot that building, another person needs to shoot that when it had already happened. So there are bits like that. And then the guy who gets stuck in the wall, would he have been in the wall since that building was made? When they were putting the bricks in that building, wouldn't they have gone like, oh, why is there a dead body here? I don't know. So there's bits like that I'm trying to get my head around. There's probably an explanation there. I can't get my head around it. But as a spectacle, what a third act, because it delivers.
Chris, when you get killed in the inversion, you get killed in real life.
Well, yeah, I know, but what I'm saying is, then would he have been, because he gets sealed in that building? Would he have been in that building since it was? I don't know. There are ideas still that I'm trying to pick apart and trying to get the head around. But in terms of a third action set piece, it does exactly what it needs to. It goes in literally all guns blazing, brings everything to a close. The intercutting as well between the boat segment as well, which is just as interesting. It's not like one of those moments where you're kind of going like, oh, come on, though, get back to the action, because you are engaged in that stuff as well, and how the two storylines converge at the end, happening simultaneously. It's great stuff.
Here's the thing, no matter how cool the scene is, a little part of me still wants it to be kind of a spy thriller finish instead of being like an army kind of war film finish.
It is kind of like another Inception, sort of faceless drones kind of people, soldiers, militarized faction that are just kind of there. I can see that. But
I would have liked a bit of espionage, towards the end, seen as it is an espionage thriller. But
yeah.
I mean, we get the espionage bit. It's Cat, isn't it? Pretending to be past Cat, which is another thing in itself. But
yeah,
the war sequence, it's more the fact that that last trailer came out with the music video. And I believe that last trailer chucked loads of clips in from the
it did.
From the final act. And, heading into this blockbuster era of, I said in the chat, I'm not watching that. No way, we're too close. If that building explosion had been ruined on a trailer, I'd have been gutted. It's the kind of thing that I can imagine Nolan not signing off on. It's like, okay, it's out in a week. Let's just throw the last big thing in there to get people in. And seeing the build-up, there's a distraction. We've got a distraction coming. And then you're starting to clock something when the building starts going up. And then you realize it's a countdown. They're at 5:01, they're at 4:59. And it's a second. And it's this bizarre, and it's real, and that's what's crazy about it. This was filmed in like Eagle Mountains. It was even in California. How none of that fully leaked online? That set was probably locked down better than 2020 has been in some states. But nothing, I saw nothing, there was a poster of him in an army uniform, there was one shot of him in an army uniform, but an outright war in the final act had absolutely nothing. And I think it was hidden so well. I mean, I can't remember too much about the Inception marketing, but it'd be like not putting any of the snow stuff in any of the trailers. It just completely took me away. And when we're talking about the confusion of the first viewing, getting thrown into here's a briefing. I don't know what they're trying to get. I don't know why they're trying to get it. I don't know what's happening. It's there's a briefing, there's a war, let's go. They're fighting past, we're fighting forwards. Blue, red, go team.
And you're still trying to work out scenes that happened 5 or 6 scenes ago. It's the snowball effect, isn't it, that we talked about?
And it's kind of what I said at the first reading. I didn't realize that was the future. I knew it was Cat in the future, but I was like, why? I didn't realize that was the future Kenneth Branagh as well. I thought that was the past Kenneth Branagh. And I was like, that's why the little things like that start to click more and more and more. And it was done so well. And you mentioned the intercutting. I think that's the big thing, that the only emotional weight of this film is the Cat and her son thing. And the fact that they choose not to, the key point is that he's using the photo as levity on her. She can't see the kid. He sends the kid off to Pompeii without her. He controls everything, which is why you don't see her interact with him. The whole crux of this film is coming that she wants the kid. She wants to be able to see her son. And it's that boiling point it puts her down where she's prepared to kill him, and does so a couple of minutes before she should have been allowed to. It's a really nice spin, and what I think bumps with that moment, and I've kind of got away from the war bit, but it's the fact that Kenneth Branagh is so terrifying. When he goes to stroke her hair, you're half expecting the sort of Thanos choke or something where, has he clocked on that she's from the future, or no, he hasn't? And it's this sort of tense build-up where you don't know why she's putting sun cream on the floor. You really know she's killing time, but we don't know the plan. And ultimately, she loses control, shoots him. Music is perfect in that moment as well. The whole build-up to the execution of him, his realization, the jump forward, everything, it is perfect for Cat's character. But
brutal silence, the drop in the music when he goes overboard as well.
That's always got the biggest reaction every single time.
When they see it.
The two wince scenes are the head crack and the cheese grater. The cheese grater is majestic. I picked up one the other day, and that's the first time I'd held one since Tenet, and not that there was anyone to sort of slam down, but you can't look at a cheese grater the same after watching that film. There are things that are done which shouldn't, and it's like the typical action thing. It's like what Keanu Reeves says: if you see this in a scene, it will be a weapon. And the cheese grater is now part of that life. Now the stakes are up for John Wick 4. But
I'm trying to think. There was a kitchen fight in the Raid 2, did anyone use a cheese? I'm very surprised if no one used a cheese grater in that film.
Was it just knife? I thought it was just knives and pans, wasn't it?
Pans, yeah, knives and pans mainly.
Oh, they missed a trick there. But
wine, many bottles of wine.
Moment of silence for all the wine that was wasted in this scene. But my one criticism, with the Kenneth Branagh, the final Kenneth Branagh and cat scene at the end is I feel it detracts a little bit from Sator's character, the character of Kenneth Branagh, in that at that point in the film, he's been established as a guy that's 1,000 steps ahead of everyone. He's like playing the entire game. He's seen many aspects, and then he can change what he does based on things that he's seen before. He's very methodical. He's very clever. He's very ahead of the game. And there's a moment where he's talking to her, and he's radios through to the boat to the past cat that went ashore with a son, and he says, like, it's funny, they say that you were the one who went ashore. And she doesn't quite convincingly play it off. She just goes, what do you think? It matters what you think. And then she goes in for a kiss, and he kind of pulls away and goes like, I need to attend to some business. And you think, oh, he's clocked it, he knows something's up. But
it would have been a fantastic ending if it ended up with her being like chased around the boat and stuff like that, and her
maybe, but it's in that moment it looks like he knows that something's up, but then by the end of it seems like he's shocked when she reacts that way. And I think, to me, in those final moments, that takes away from the character for me, because even if he had 0.1% of doubt, he'd be out of there and he'd be like, I've got to find a different time to do this. I've got to, keep myself in the game. I know he was dying, but it wasn't like he was dying. He picked that moment to die, but he would have lived on past that point. So the only way that I can kind of justify it in my head is that at that point, Sator thinks that she is indefinitely dead. But in a world where time travel is a thing and inversion and everything like that, he'd be kind of naive to think that there's no possibility that she could still be alive. So I don't know. That's probably one of my only criticisms with Kenneth Branagh's character at the end, or the writing at the end, in that it looks like he clocks onto her plan, but then kind of does nothing about it and kind of literally rolls over and admits defeat.
It's a great scene because obviously he goes back, because that's where they say, isn't it, that's the last time he felt love or something.
And it was a free window as well where he'd left and he can be there, yeah.
And going back to a later viewing, I think it's probably the third one, where it came back to it, and it's like she says at the beginning of the film that I went to shore and I got a very quick phone call off my husband to say come back, and then I saw someone dive off, and you get the little speech. And it's again, you can't understand that until you obviously get to the final point. And I think that's a really big thing. But with him, because he's obviously chosen that specific moment to die, I think because he thinks he's won, it's, again, awful Bond comparison, but it's that kind of arrogance of a villain that's always their downfall. Because if he'd have clocked it, he could have, chomped on the CIA pill. My biggest thing with this is, if they say the CIA pills are medically induced comas, would he have actually died if he'd have took it? That's what I always thought. Like, I know that's so pathetic. That's so like cinema sins. That's the one thing that really got me. I was like, wait a minute. I was like, John David Washington took one of them. It just put him in a coma.
Yeah, one he took was fake just for that one mission.
Yeah.
Oh, just for that. Because I didn't know if that's how they recruited people for Tenet.
That was their one recruitment. Not every single CIA suicide capsule is a recruitment for Tenet.
It's not his bed, is it? It's his mates that's on the floor in front of him. So that's kind of there. But I just thought it's a great, nice scene. I think the line that I like most is when he's talking to her and he says, we both know that my opinion of you is far higher than yours of me. And that was a really nice, that felt so genuine, that line where I just love everything he says in this film, every action, every line. Kenneth Branagh absolutely steals it. I think it's a very two-dimensional villain, but I think he gets the most he can out of it in the circumstances, and that's why he's so phenomenal. There could have been dozens and dozens of actors that is just like, oh, here's a boring Russian, but there's a certain gravitas that Kenneth Branagh brings to this, and I think that delivers on that. And I think that's why it makes for the perfect cutting that normally I'd be like, oh, get back to the war scene. Sometimes in Inception you're like, get back to the bloody level 3. Let's get away from the car for a moment. And in this, it's like, no, I'm happy to be in either storyline. I don't have a preference, and I'm going to enjoy both. And I think that's a really big thing. But the going back to the war scene stuff, I love the fact that Patterson changes gears halfway through, especially on the rewatches when you realise that that's him in the truck at the beginning, that's him at the truck in the middle. he's in so many more of those moments, and he just says, I thought you guys needed my help, and ultimately he pays the price for his life, which he is the locksmith that's shot in the head on the floor. And a disgusting visual, which will be paused many times, is the photo of the mask with the blood sprayed everywhere from the headshot. I'd imagine that being a paused GIF a lot in the future for people to see, like Marv in Pulp Fiction. But it's a tragic character arc that, I didn't fully clock on in the first viewing. I knew it was him. It says, like, oh, how's he dead? But it's the second viewing when you get to that final scene and they sit there like, you're the best locksmith we know. He's like, it's going to be me going down there. And it's the John David Washington moment. His best acting of the film is the moment where he knows Rob Pattinson's about to go back down there, and he just starts, the eyes go red. And that's some of his best lines, is him trying to see, who recruited you. And he's kind of scared at the answers. And the reaction those two pull off, and it's what Rob Pattinson says. This is the end of a beautiful friendship. And I thought,
it's kind of spin on the Casablanca line, isn't it? The end of the Casablanca line with that. I just thought Pattinson sold that. And if, to me, the most interesting character being the one that ultimately dies as well. I think that has a big sort of emotional attachment point where it doesn't hit you viewing one, but on the other viewings, it's like, oh my god, he's like walking to his grave and to the helicopter.
I did always think, why didn't anyone shoot down the henchman who put the tripwire down, like for the tunnel and stuff like that, which sealed them in?
Because the henchman's inverted, isn't he? He's already inverted, so it's that whole pincer. So they know.
But why didn't anyone from either team shoot him down?
It was kind of a way, though, wasn't it? It was like very quick. He just like rappels down, does it, and then out of the conflict. And it's just.
I thought he's inverted, so he's really been in the future, so knows to go back and put a tripwire there to stop people going in. So I just assumed it was like him on the pincer movement as well.
Yeah.
Also, henchman-wise, he doesn't have much to do, but he's quite memorable.
Yeah,
I know often it's like, again, a Bond cliche, isn't it? Here's the villain's henchman. He's sitting there eating the steak at the restaurant who doesn't want to go out. I like the fact that he carried on, and he ultimately almost made it to the end before he got thrown down a pit to probably the center of the earth. Who knows?
Yeah, the endings where, just going back to like the Neil character. I know we've talked about Neil already, but we've got to talk more about him because he's a fantastic character. At the very end, just breaking down the fact as well, he doesn't just go back to, he knows that he's going to his death deep down, although he can't know that information because they established early on in the film that you can't really, you have to keep people ignorant so that it's the whole notion of free will. And they do have like a theoretical conversation about that, where is it really free will, or have we sort of like made ourselves do it? Have we like influenced things before? So that whole thing there, that's quite ambiguous there, and that's quite nice to read into that. But the fact that he goes back not to just unlock that door, but he takes a bullet for the protagonist, which just shows how strong their friendship is, that he doesn't just go there to do the door, he actually walks in front of the gun and takes that bullet to save his friend's life. So that speaks volumes for that friendship there. Again, it's just a friendship that I really want to see in a future film somehow, or if that's possible.
Here's the thing. They did say it's the start of the start of his journey.
The end for me, and it's just
possibly they could do a sequel to this. I think we kind of talked about that, whether Nolan would do a sequel to a film or not. But if there's any film, I feel like this one has the most kind of variety to do so.
I think, and it depends, if Robert Pattinson blows up after Batman, then maybe that's a potential. I don't know.
You could make him the main character and make the protagonist kind of the side character in the next one and completely invert it. You never know.
I mean, just even getting my head around the concept of how would you structure that and how would you set it, and the state of both the characters.
If he was going to structure it, he probably already has. Like, it's one of those things where he couldn't just write a sequel to it on the spot. He would have already had it planned out. But then, so long to kind of come up with a concept for the film because he had his secret sequel in mind for it.
And really, when you hit the ending, like the whole film based around inversion and everything, the real inversion, it's brought more to a personal level, and it's the inversion of this friendship where one's beginning and one's ending, and that's sort of where the crux of the film, where it ultimately comes down to, which I thought was he humanized it in that last moment. But I know that he can't really extrapolate that because, as I mentioned, the friendship happens off screen in a different time, in a different realm kind of thing. You can't know that.
It's very clear that he's watched the River Song episodes of Doctor Who. That's all I'm saying.
Oh God, why would anyone do that to themselves? But no, I mean that kind of takes us to the end of the set pieces. So I mean, I think we need to like do a deep dive now into some theories, perhaps.
I'm going to go to the toilet before you guys do any deep dives, but you can start because I don't have.
Oh no, my friend, you need to bear witness to these theories. This is
nips the loot. Right, everyone in the comments, if you have any questions at all about this film, anything you need clarifying, we aren't the be all and end alls.
We're not actually Christopher Nolan. We can't answer all your questions.
Between the two of us, we're probably like 95% of it. So we've got some big things. You know, I dropped a revelation. You've seen my diagram. There's like 13 pages of notes. If you've got questions, I probably have the answers. And this isn't Wikipedia either. Chris, you are a vouch witness for this. I'm going to save this because Tate's not heard this as well, so we'll get into this. But as I said, any comments, any theories, anything you want clarifying, confusion, comment it. We'll talk about it because this is going to get deep. This is like unknown territory. I've not seen any spoiler discussions on this film yet. I'm sure there are probably some out there who probably have answered things, but if not, now is the time to
There's a few timelines explained. I've seen videos crop up like that, but this is all under one roof today. This is a review on the film. This is theories, analysis, questions answered, everything. This is a deep dive.
And I think one thing's worth mentioning as well. If you guys want to have been the last sort of 9 days, the Charlie Day gif from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Not that I've watched the series, but the red tape, the wall that has essentially been me for the last.
So, I have a question about this part. Are we going back through the entire film? Because I feel like we've already done this, or are we doing theories here?
Bit of everything, probably everything, probably all of it. Just
oh dear.
I think we've covered most of it. I do think we're already.
Yeah, we've done the main set pieces and the core.
I was going to say, because if we're doing the entire film, I may have to bail.
Because I have here the narrative structure, which I have devised. This was after the third viewing. I sat down and I just had some thoughts in my head. Viewing 2 was the 12 pages of notes. Everything has happened, as Rob Patterson would say. Everything was noted. Chris, I sent you a photo at 2 a.m. last Saturday. Didn't even realise the time. I literally started writing, and then the next thing I knew, it was like 2 a.m.
Even I opened my phone at 2 a.m. and was like, "Oh God, what's going on?" I'm like, "George, get some sleep. Like, it's great and everything, but get some sleep for the love of God."
But, I think the main thing, I should have actually digitalized this. The narrative thing is here, but we've got a much nicer visual, which I'm going to let Chris go into first, because as we go through the film, we've got some other things. You know, this is known a film. There are things going on that can't be explained, and I think a really big thing is to talk about the Sator Square, which I'm handing over to Chris there.
Yeah, the Sator Square. So, ladies and gentlemen, Tate, welcome to Beginner's Latin with your host, Chris Garner. I found this on Wikipedia.
Square, got it, yeah.
I found this on... so, George has prepared a very nice graphic for me. If you could please bring that up for me, good sir. This will be your reference, and I shall be your guide. There we go. So, that is the Sator Square. That is one of many Sator Squares. That one in particular, I believe, is from a place called Opide in France. And the concept is it's a 5x5 letter, which spells out 5 Latin words, which can be read backwards and forwards, up and down. And all of them have definitions. All of them have Latin definitions. And each of these words, as you can see, the main one going through the middle, is the title of the movie. All of them correspond to something from the film. My theory is that probably Christopher Nolan went on holiday somewhere. He already knew of this thing. I don't know. And an entire film universe was constructed from this thing. So let's go from the top. So we've obviously got Sator, speaks for itself. That is the name of Kenneth Branagh's villain character in the film. You've got Arapo, which was the name of Kat's love interest, who she had an affair with, who is now no longer speaking, no longer walking, because Kenneth Branagh got to him before anyone else could. Tenet, the name of the movie, the name of the company that it's founded to basically be the watchful guardian of the world through time travel. Opera, the beginning of the film, the opera scene, and Rotors, which is the company that belongs to Sator. You can see it in the free banks. Is that what it's called? What's it called? The freeways. 3.
It's
That's
the
it.
little Pentagon vault things. It's his company name.
Yep, and you can see it on the doors. So that's that. But oh no, we go deeper. That's just surface level. On this channel, we go deeper. This is like the Inception gif all over again. All of these have obviously translations and what they mean. So Sator in Latin translates out to sower, planter, founder, progenitor, usually divine, and originator. Well, the usually divine, he does see himself as a god, and he has kind of planted these things and set up since the very beginning, essentially. So that corresponds to that. Arapo, there's many definitions. Some people say that it corresponds to a name, but some have kind of settled on the idea that it belongs to an Egyptian god called Hippocrates. I believe it's an Egyptian god, or it's an Egyptian in origin. And it was basically the god of silence, which again corresponds to the fact that he is no longer talking now. I told you, Tate, we were going to go deep on this thing. Tenet translates out to keeps, comprehends, possesses, masters, preserves, or sustains, and that's precisely what they're doing.
I add one thing, sorry. Everyone's talking about Tenet in the final sequence. 10 minutes forwards, TAN. 10 minutes backwards, TAN.
Yeah. And so Tenet is to preserve, essentially, is to preserve something, can sustain something, and that's precisely what the company that we later find out at the end of the film is set up by John David Washington's character in the future, is to sustain the world, so it doesn't fall into enemy hands. The opera, I mean, that has definitely like other translations, but let's be honest, in the film, it's just that it starts off in an opera. And then rotors is to do with wheels and rotation and turning, which you could link to perhaps the actual, I forgot what they're called in the film. My God, the
machines.
The machines, yeah, the things that revolve around and put them into the inverse world. So, I mean, I discovered that. I read through that. Maybe I'm reading into it, but I think it's all there, in all honesty. I think it is a bit sort of like a media studies or English language filling a word count kind of thing. But
that is, after hearing that, that's 100% where you got the name of the film from.
Oh, I think it can go deeper because the origin of the Sator Square is in Pompeii. And what holiday is Kat on? She goes to Pompeii with the family. He was probably on holiday with Pompeii, probably saw one of these in France. Probably thought, oh, you know what? Let's put 2 and 2 together and make it 5,000 and let's go for a new film. But yeah, Chris, that was your brilliant device. I loved when you told me about it. I was like, what on earth is that? I've never heard of it. And now every question.
I've heard of a Sator Square before, but I never knew that Tenet was part of it.
It's just layers upon layers upon layers. We do actually have a comment from The Life of Brian. He's unsure about a certain thing, so I'll just bring that up. I'm still a bit lost on the opera scene. Where does it stand? Was it just his recruitment or somewhere in the timeline? It's the only scene we don't really go back to.
Well, we see his bag tag, Neil's bag tag, as the person who's actually shooting the inverted bullet in that scene. So that is Neil kind of being on the mission to make sure that he is the one who gets recruited and make sure he's got interest in the project and stuff like that. That's how I saw it.
No,
so,
not
rub hands together.
Go on,
right.
George.
So, if you take one moment and have a look at this image, if you're watching at home, Ukraine, which is the opera scene, takes place at the exact simultaneous same day as the finale fight at Stars 12 / Vietnam Holiday. The opera scene is the same place. Michael Caine's interview, Sir Michael Crosby, sorry, guys. He says he's eating his food, which is a very rude gesture for a noble knight to eat while talking. He says 2 weeks ago, the same day as the opera siege, an explosion happened on Stars 12. Same day as the siege because John David Washington was in the opera siege. There's your first bit of, okay, that's the ending. Now I'm going to get into the opera scene. So, obviously, he's going in with the CIA, working with the Russians in this scene. I need everyone to follow me because Chris has had many of these voice notes last few days, and essentially he's going in to save his guy Whitman, who he does the "We live in a Twilight World" line, which Chris loves. And Whitman says, "I've made contact with the Russians, and obviously, where's the gear code? What we're looking for?" And he's given one piece of the algorithm, which I haven't even spoke about yet. Actually, we are giving one piece of the algorithm, which is what the terrorists have come in for. So the reason the terrorists have gone in is because they're working for Kenneth Branagh, because he needs the algorithm, the last piece to complete the puzzle. Essentially, guys, simplified, imagine if Infinity War started with Thanos having 5 out of the 6 Infinity Stones, and the whole film was getting the 6th stone. So, obviously it goes wrong. So John David Washington gets compromised when he realizes the Russians they're working with are actually putting bombs out to kill the audience as well. I'm not going to do that. He sends his team off into the tunnels to go their own way back, to go somewhere else. John David Washington and his mate go into the van back to the Russians. Now, the Russians realize they've been betrayed, or they found out they know the truth, which is where they then shoot his mates and take them to the train yard, asking where the team is, because the Russians need the thing. Sorry, I said Russians, I mean Ukrainians. They're Ukrainians, not Russians. So the Ukrainians need it. And then they mention later on, your team was killed. That's part A. As the film delves into it, you then find obviously that Sator was behind the terrorist attack, but they mentioned that they didn't directly get what they needed. That went to the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians are transporting it across wherever the fight.
They're taking it to a secure bunker, right, where it's going to be locked away, which is where the heist is in the car chase later on in the film.
And although kind of John Dane Washington thinks it's plutonium, obviously Kenneth Branagh knows the entire time it's not plutonium, it's the algorithm, and his goal was to always betray John David Washington in those scenes. It's obviously where we get the interrogation scene that comes into it. So essentially the opera scene, what I thought was just a meaningless prologue, kind of like the Dark Knight one. Ultimately, it has no hearing on the story. She outright is one of the most important scenes of the entire film. And of course, as Tate said, we get the introduction to Robert Pattinson, who is knowing to help him to save him at that point, because he is going to go on to become a member of Tenet. And I believe it's Whitman that betrays him and spills the beans, because when Kenneth Branagh has him under hostage, he says, "We live in a twilight world." He says, "Oh, that's Whitman." So the guy they went in to save is originally the one that talked and betrayed them.
The only thing that throws me in the opera scene is how a seemingly forward-moving Robert Pattinson can shoot an inverted bullet. Because if he was shooting an inverted bullet, he would be in reverse. But when we see him run back down the stairs, he is in conventional, seemingly forward-moving time. He doesn't look like he's inversed, because he'd be running down the stairs backwards, and it'd look really unnatural.
In the later scene, what's it called? John David Washington's protagonist catches a bullet just in training, doesn't he? And he's going forwards. He isn't inverted, but he catches a bullet in his training, because the bullet itself.
Oh, the bullet itself. Okay, there you go. There's your explanation. Boom. Three powers combined. We've got it. We've cracked it.
So that's why I love the opera scene. I loved it anyway for being the prologue, for being the highlight of watching Star Wars 9. But ultimately, it had an important bit, and they did change.
I never realized that the Vietnam stuff happened on the same day.
Yeah, so that all comes down to the Michael Caine conversation. I think the first time you watch it, he's eating with his mouth full. Again, not a big fan. It has a lot of bearings on the plot, because obviously you ultimately realize again that when he mentioned, an explosion went off 2 weeks ago, that's the finale of the film. And going back to the Charlie Day photo, ultimately this film, the final point you're in the present is the moment John David Washington steps into the machine. That is the last time we're in the present with the film. Obviously, we know things come from the future, but we never once go back to that moment. And that is the tipping point. I mentioned the Memento comparison. There's a famous Christopher Nolan photo where he's explaining the plot of Memento to someone. I've lost my Sharpie. There it is. And essentially, the photo on... I'm sorry, I'm going to draw this while we're live, actually. The photo on the Memento discussion is like a big oval, and there's loads of lines that looks like that as a really quick thing. And that's basically the plot. Each scene happens line in line. And that's where the Tenet comparison comes in for me again, that even from a narrative standpoint, knowing that the ending of this film is actually before the film / the same time the film's happening, there's so much more going on within that. So I hope that has answered that question. Dave's put thank you for that. And if you have any more, we can probably crack them. But I'm trying to think, is there any other big bits that... I think we haven't really spoke about the interrogation. I know that's jumping into things.
We can go into that. We do have a really quick comment from Carl, who's just saying, "Can't wait to watch the film again after tonight's discussion. Really helped me get my head around the film and understanding the story." We are going to go into the interrogation now, which I do think is probably, alongside the opera scene, probably the second hardest scene to kind of wrap your head around the concept of it. I know for a fact this one took me a while to understand, but I think I've got it now. I'm going to let George explain it again, though, because you've got the notes. You've got the notes, my friend.
I didn't actually read the prologue notes, by the way, for that, but that was me.
I'm a sitting duck here for this one. This is going to be interesting.
So the interrogation scene is the moment where I turned around Chris again and said, I don't have a fucking clue what's going on. I'd already said it a couple more times, but I think I kind of play us like, do you know what's going on?
It's like, no.
No. And it's the interrogation scene, I think, is the crux. So essentially, the key thing is before the even truck is Kenneth Branagh's talking to Kat, talking politely. He kind of, after he obviously batters her, he basically puts on a headset, tells his pals, I need you to tell me absolutely everything that happens as it happens so I know. Now, what we don't understand at this point in the film is that this is a temporal pincer. Now, I've got a clear definition I wrote for a temporal pincer in my head. Give me one moment and I shall grab it. So the temporal pincer is when half of the team are attacking in the past, the other half are attacking in the present. And it's basically a common tactic, I guess, used by both the military and obviously Sir Kenneth Branagh. Now, in this moment, obviously we don't know it, but the car behind them that starts shooting at them, they're watching them the entire time. So they're telling him, there's a fire engine, there's this, there's a BMW. Oh, they've got the suitcase. Oh, they've passed the suitcase. So we don't know that Kenneth Branagh is obviously in the past at this point when you're watching it. Obviously, he rocks up in the car with Kat hostage. Now, Kat is in the present. She's not wearing the mask. It's basically took her out of the building while he's reversed to use as bait. And you think, okay, that's him. He's betrayed them. But actually, it's him from the future knowing that in 10 minutes' time, John David Washington has already betrayed them. And that's a really big thing. So current Kenneth Branagh is sat inside the building, listening in on the radio, saying, okay, what's happening? They'll be like, okay, you're inverted. You've got Kat hostage, this. And then it reaches a point where they get the case, they do the exchange, and they open up and the algorithm's not there. So obviously, Kenneth Branagh's team then obviously start shooting at them, kidnap them, take them into the interrogation room. There's the prequel to the interrogation room. Take a breath. Right. The interrogation room itself, to me, is one of the most complex things I've ever seen. And it's, to me, after Tuesday's debacle, maybe his second best interrogation scene, maybe even one of his better ones in terms of what he tried to do doing it. Kat is obviously inverted. She doesn't have a clue what's going on, but she's in the inverted world. Now, John David Washington sat down, and you can hear something on the radio above them speaking complete English. That's Kenneth Branagh. He is basically hiding in the room next door. Chris, I've deleted that photo I sent you the other day. I drew a photo basically explaining where Kenneth Branagh is in the building.
He's on the same side as John David Washington, essentially hiding in the machine. And then obviously he questions him, runs back into the machine, and then interrogates him from the reverse.
Yeah, so he's interrogated him in the present. So he's asking, which car did you leave in? Tell me, is it the BMW? Is it in the fire truck? Tell me she dies. 1, 2, 3. So he's saying all of this on the phone in the present with the headset. And when the moment comes where I think he has enough, he obviously goes to shoot him in the head. That's when enter Kick-Ass and his squadron. He jumps in the machine. He's got the phone. And he realizes as well, okay, because they've told me everything in the headset, I now know what I need to do this. So he already knows what he's going to say to Kat. He knows he's going to shoot her. He knows he's going to do a countdown. And then he says to John David Washington, John David Washington says, I've already told you. He knows he has to act that in reverse. So he's obviously driving out in the past, in inverted, to get to the machine because he wants to check the BMW's glove box to find the algorithm because that's where John David Washington has told him where it is. It's not there because he's been lied to. It's actually in John David Washington's car because he's now magically inverted. And there's a big giveaway. So now we're jumping forward 5 minutes. When John David Washington's inverted, he looks at himself. Obviously, he doesn't recognize himself, but he sees both Kenneth Branagh and past him looking at the car because obviously we see that. He throws the algorithm into the car, and because Kenneth Branagh knows that John David Washington's in the car, he knows that it's going to be in there. You can actually see it come out of the car when it spins upside down and the random bizarre explosion happens, which is really weird. But if that's made the scene worse or better, he basically hands it over to him. I don't know if I saw it.
So confused right now.
I'm fucking lost.
This is the thing, isn't it? Like, I'm not lost anymore. Like, I get all of this, but it's trying to explain it. Like, again, this comes down to the whole point in this review. Everything. How does Christopher Nolan come up with this stuff that I'm sat here that I've been thinking about for 8 days?
He sits down for years and just kind of draws things and says, "Does that work? No. Okay, let's try this."
But he's been doing that whilst making great films. Like, James Cameron sat down for 13 years and says, yes, Avatar 2, 3, 4, and 5. But he's not released like any other good films between now and then. This is a guy that's had this idea for 20 years. And 20 years ago, he had the idea for bloody Inception at the same time. He spent 7 years writing this. In the 7 years, he's made
They
Interstellar.
probably started off as the same film, not going to lie.
It wouldn't surprise me. But it just reaches this point of this magnitude of one man can do this concept. You know, it's not a shared screenplay credit. It's not, I know that Emma Thomas is his wife and that she produces his films. I would hope that she has a little bit of say, because I can't imagine her just being like, he can come to the middle and goes, I've just had another idea for an action sequence, and it'll be like, you know, add it to the Notebook. That Notebook had a Boeing 747 get blown up. And in an interview this week, he said, imagine telling a kid that you can one day blow up a Boeing 747. Different meaning nowadays, but it's like when I was skimming through that book there's a photo of like Hot Wheels and all the trucks, and they're like, do I think 8-year-old Christopher Nolan like had some Hot Toys and there was a couple of like trucks, smaller cars, and do you think he like plotted this like 40 years ago?
No, I think 50-year-old Christopher Nolan was there at home, like planning this scene out with his Hot Wheels cars, with his camera above, like doing that whole thing.
But yeah, that's another big scene. I don't know if there's any others. What are we at on here?
I think I don't know. I think they're the two major ones.
They're the two main ones that people struggle with. I'll quickly mention Cats, because a lot of people do struggle with this. So the reason they have to go inverted is because she's been shot inverted. If they bring her into the present, that will reverse it and basically kill her in 3 hours, which is what they say. But for it to heal naturally, she needs to live in the inverted world, which is why you have the shipping containers and them going back to the airport, because they are ultimately going back in time for her to heal, but they need to get to the previous gear point to then go back to the present, which is where the kind of joke is, oh, Oslo wasn't secure a week ago. And at the very beginning of the Kenneth Branagh scene, he mentions that he got everything shipped in from the Oslo freeway. That's why the shipping container's there. So they know that journey is a straight reversal, jump back to the present, and everything's hunky-dory, and then they've got to go back to the past again to stop the bomb going off.
But she was still shot, therefore there is still a scar. See, I understood that bit. That was one of the bits with the inversion which I completely understood. I got that.
And I think that's the main things for me. I don't have any other groundbreaking theories. I've not been able to read the book. It arrived at sort of 2:30 this afternoon, so I couldn't really get a shot from work. So I'm sure I'm going to be adding to these across the next couple of hours, potentially next couple of days. I have seen it 4 times now.
Or we're going to have another a video of George just like rambling, like actually dressed as Charlie Day from that one episode of Always Sunny.
If it's answered questions, I'm willing to do it, as I think it's helped with the life of Brian.
I just want you just like slapping board, Carol.
It's going to reach that point, and maybe it already has. If I didn't care about my wall, I probably would have blue tacked these up to do like a photo of it all. But I think it's the drawing. I think this is the moment where everything went out of control, was when you draw a narrative structure. This wasn't 2 in the morning.
Are you going to frame that diagram?
What I think I'm going to do is that in case the world ever gets to red carpet again, I'm going to ignore the fact I have a Dark Knight poster. I'm going to approach Christopher Nolan and say, these were the notes I made across the 7 days after watching Tenet. Please, would you sign them?
Oh, that'd be amazing.
That would be insane.
And I will.
He reads them and says, "Nah, you're fucking wrong, mate," and then just hands it back to you and walks on.
Someone I know on my Facebook's got 3 scripts signed off him, and every time he's brought him a script, he says, "Thank you for presenting me with a script or a screenplay," because it's not the normal kind of thing. So, Lunatic with his Tenet notes is definitely, I think, a memorable one.
Mm-hmm.
But
what you do is you should say, "Oh, keep it, put it up somewhere."
I mean,
sorry, go on.
I was going to say I don't know. I don't know what's next. I'm trying to remember anything else. I think that's me covered in my head. Carl just put wow over 2 hours tonight. We're almost there, Carl. We're a minute and a half away.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
There we go. Like I said, if there's questions, we've probably got the answers. If not, as usual, if you're watching this on demand, because we're not always going to be live. I'm not going to live a 24/7 live stream to answer your Tenet queries, but drop us a DM on our Twitter, as we always go on about. And I know this is the wrong time to bring up socials, but we might as well do it now. Message us on Facebook or tweet us at Cinema Savvy. Drop it in a DM because we don't want to spoil it for people who haven't watched it. Obviously, we're on Instagram as well. So if you've got questions, put them on there because we will get back to you on those. We do answer things like that. It just adds something, people are going to come into this film knowing this wasn't easy. I'm talking like a lunatic, whereas 8 days ago, I sat here probably like 2 hours later than it is now, just sat and saying, I don't have an absolute clue what's gone on. I don't understand what I've watched. And here I am now, completely losing the plot. I'm more invested in this than I've been invested in any Star Wars film in my lifetime, which is remarkable to say the least. I don't think I've ever drawn a grid for a film before. I've ever done notes on a plot. I wanted to take them into the cinema, but these were all done off memory across the viewings, and these have been updated since. And I've got... Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, I'm trying to think of... There's a film that I watched, which is quite a famous film about time travel. I can't remember the name of it, but it's the only film which I would consider to be as confusing. And that's got time travel in it.
Terminator, Back to the Future, About Time.
No, it's a small primer.
Harry Potter and the Prisoner.
Primer.
Okay.
Here we go.
Primer.
Sorry, guys. If you guys want to see the thoughts
Seriously,
behind
it's actually... Primer is the only film which I can think of which kind of comes close to the levels of time travel, what fuckery that this film had. Trying to kind of figure stuff out. And it's basically about four or five people who invent a time travel box, but then it's like there's like 6 different layers to the kind of time travel and shit like that. Like, it's insane if you wanted to watch it. It's a proper thinking one. It isn't an action film. It's one where you just kind of try and figure out for yourself.
I want to bring up what Carl's did because I'm completely there with Carl on this one. Mine was Donnie Darko. I said exactly the same thing. Donnie Darko is still a film that I've only seen once. I definitely need more multiple viewings on it. It was a film that I knew had a massive cult following. Everyone talks about it. I thought it was a horror film. All I'd seen was like the giant demonic Tim Burton looking bunny rabbit that's haunting. Oh God, what's his name? Jake Gyllenhaal's character. But yes, that's a very complex time travel, parallel universe, all kind of movie. I have it on DVD. I do need to give that a watch again. But yeah, I'd probably say that one's probably the closest to something like Tenet, maybe, for me at least.
On a quick final note from me, these notes, here's the following thing. Is that the waiter from Following? These I would just write questions to myself. Bomb went off recently in Star Square. This all happened. I'm trying to read it, see if there's anything big I missed, but I don't think I have.
The ramblings of a madman.
I did end the protagonist with the watchful guardian. It might as well have been. And that's one thing we haven't brought up, actually, Chris. I'm going to give you the header on this. We always speak about the Christopher Nolan music video to finish a film. We didn't get one this time around. How do you feel after watching it more than once?
I'm okay with it now. I've came to terms with it. I think that a lot of people are talking about the Nolan tropes. Some people are saying it's a negative thing with this. I have seen some people say that Christopher Nolan, M. Night Shyamalan himself, I've seen all the clickbait articles with those headings. I would have liked one. They're always great. But I don't know if it was inherently necessary because everything's tied up. You have like your final parting with Neil's character. You have the tying up of the loose ends. And then you end on I guess if we're going with the Maximilian theory, the rather ambiguous shot of Kat walking away with her son. And actually, you mentioned about the theme earlier, the reversed Neil theme. Someone's probably already done it now that it's all out there on YouTube. I really do genuinely want to hear if that's the same theme. I am really interested in hearing about that. I'm fine with it not being a music video. I think you could have easily done one. I think it would have still fit. But I think, you could have had him go back to Tenet or just do like one more inverse of picking up the gun, going back to basics kind of thing, or training at the end. You could have done it. I think that the ending, it's fine for what it is. It's perfectly serviceable.
Absolutely. Right. So I think that wraps up tonight. We've crossed the 2-hour barrier as we thought we would.
We didn't cross the 3-hour barrier the way you guys were talking about this review before.
Carl says, wasn't complaining, keep going. But we have gone past 2 hours, but I think we have said it that we can do thoughts, though, I guess, just to wrap up.
Final thoughts. I'm not going to rank this yet because that's coming this Saturday. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Ranking films is coming this Saturday evening.
I still haven't seen all the Nolan films, so I could probably rank this somewhere.
My final thoughts on this is it is his most ambitious film yet. There are flaws in this, but there is enough in this to stand out from his previous work that I can separate it from them. There is so much going on. There is so much to enjoy. And ultimately, the key core of this is, we haven't even spoken about IMAX tonight. I'm not going to go into that now, but he makes these films for you to watch the big screen. If you can't go to the cinema, that's fine. You're not going to be watching this video. But to be able to be back at a cinema, going in multiple times, there is obviously big things going on in the world, but to be able to keep going back in and just experiencing this over and over, it's the kind of things we live for. Granted, it's a very different world to what we thought it would be sort of 7-8 months ago. But the fact we can go to this, we can pick this apart, as we have done maybe too much. To me, it's just a blessing to have that experience, and to have that experience with another Nolan film to live up to it. To me, his streak continues. I know that, Chris, you hate Dark Knight Rises. I still believe he hasn't made a bad film yet. I do like following a lot more than some of his others, which obviously we can talk about on Saturday. But to me, this is up there with his best. The more I've seen this, the more I've thought about this, that them viewings where I could watch this without the need to think, just to have the experience of seeing it again, that was just a complete blessing. So for me, an absolute joy to be back, and it's got some of his best set pieces, and it's everything you expect, want, and get from a Nolan film. So that's my polite final thoughts. At this point, if you're still watching, then I'm not going to say if I liked it or enjoyed it. That's my kind of final. That's the final thing I can give to you that I haven't already waffled on about for the first 2 hours. So that's kind of me done for tonight, and I guess there'll be more of a summary on Saturday.
For me, I'm kind of exactly where you're at, but I can see both sides. I have seen, there is a very vocal minority, I will say, that think that Christopher Nolan kind of jumped the shark with this one. It's kind of, he's too far up himself. He's kind of fell into all the tropes and everything like that. But they talk about the lack of characterization, which I do think is a notable thing in this. But I also think that that's a notable thing with a lot of his other films. He's always been a very plot-centric and concept-centric director over character. That's just kind of his style. That's just his ideas are very grandiose out there and haven't really been touched on or haven't really been developed to this scale. So I will completely acknowledge all the shortcomings in terms of its characters, and I would have liked to have seen characters, or even just the main character, having a shred more humanity or investment. Why is he doing what he's doing? What is it really about this whole operation that really gives him that investment into what he's doing? I do think that is lacking, but I do think the charisma of the actors across the board, especially John David Washington and Robert Pattinson, do carry it through. And the quippy one-liners and banter that they have definitely does shine through in the film. These are among some of the best set pieces in any Christopher Nolan film, in any film that I've seen for a long time. Genuinely feel like I haven't seen stuff like this on the big screen before, and it is Nolan constantly pushing the envelope. I can completely acknowledge if someone thinks that this is too waffly, too wordy, too theoretical, and if they can't grasp it and they want to wash their hands with it after that, absolutely. I can completely understand why people would think that. And if they don't like this film based on that, that's totally fine. For me, I knew that I wanted to try and master this film. I wanted to beat this film. I didn't want to roll over and admit defeat and give up just after a first viewing. But this is the most complex Christopher Nolan film. I can absolutely say that hands down. I've never really had that with a film other than maybe Donnie Darko, as I mentioned earlier, where I have been completely clueless after a first viewing, knowing that I need those subsequent viewings. I've had them. I want more of them. It's just a fantastic big screen experience. The one drawback, though, which I do think, as you mentioned, like the 70% thing is going to turn a lot of people off, is the audio mixing, which I do think is a problem. It's a recurring problem. I think the problem's been there since around Dark Knight Rises, and it has been increasingly more persistent, especially with Interstellar, elements of Dunkirk as well. But I think this is very plot-centric, and there's a lot of exposition and dialogue, it being an espionage film. I feel like something needs to be done. Nolan's acknowledged it, and apparently it's all part of his plan. That's how he wants the sound. He wants some of the dialogue to be drowned out by louder sound, saying that environmental sounds would be louder than voices in that scene. That may be so, but dialogue's got to carry you through a film. That's where you're following the plot and the story. So I hope he changed it up for the next film. I hope he figures something out. So I do think that is a persistent issue, but I think this is an absolutely incredible film, and one that just gets better and better and more logical and more understandable, the more viewings that you watch it. Definitely worthy of the big screen as well.
For me personally, I'm tilting towards the good side of the film. Like, I enjoyed it more than I disliked it, and the elements I disliked are only minor really dislikes to the film, things which I would have preferred the film to have had. But given the film that we were given, it is an incredibly well put together film. Fantastic set pieces, the music, the cinematography, the acting, it's all excellent, it's all brilliant. But even saying that, it still ends up on like a lower half of the Nolan list, because Nolan's films are so consistently good. I figured it out in my head now. I'm not going to say it out loud. I'll say it to you two after the stream, which you guys can pick me apart and stuff like that, because I still haven't seen all of the Nolan films to be able to give a full list. But honestly, it made me think. It made me go back and rewatch it, and made me kind of not actually take notes, but take mental notes of the film. And it's the first film that's done that, I think, ever in a cinematic experience, where I've had to go back in and go, hold on, wait a sec, I need to properly, fully concentrate on what's happening this time and stuff like that. So absolute props for that. But yeah, it is a very enjoyable film, but it still does have a couple of downsides to it, which, I mean, it's downsides which we've seen in previous Nolan films. So what can you say? It may be just the director himself.
Okay, so they're all our final thoughts. Once again, a big thank you to The Life of Brian and Carl, who are still with us after over 2 hours. They're absolute troopers, and it looks like they've both really enjoyed the discussion tonight, and it's been a really good discussion to have as well. I think it's one that we definitely needed, and it's actually going to be interesting for people to go back and watch our spoiler-free and then come straight to this one as well, because all three of us have had like a massive character arc. It's brilliant between the subsequent viewings. But yes, so big thank you to everyone again. Please be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. We do have one more video for all you Christopher Nolan fans. This Saturday, 5th of September, 8 p.m. UK time, we will be ranking all of the 11 movies from worst to best. And it'll be a nice little bookend, a nice little epilogue to the Christopher Nolan month that we've had on the channel. It's been an absolute blast where we reviewed all of his films. We've got a quiz out there. We've got our original show of Battle of the Brackets that you can go back and check out if you haven't done so already. But yes, I think we should round off. So we've already done the socials. Don't know if we need to do those again. But there are theories out there. So we'll pass it over to you guys now. Please be sure to comment. Any more questions, anything you want to fire at us, please do get it in the comments down below, and we do reply to everyone. So that'll do it for us tonight. Wow, 2 hours, 11 minutes, Jesus Christ. And we will see you on Saturday for the ranking video. Thanks, everyone.